Hey guys, so we have a big announcement, so let's just get the show started. I want to remind you all that this channel is sponsored by Fritz Aquatics. We appreciate their love and support. Rogers Food is a sponsor of this channel. It's a type of frozen food that you can enjoy. Well, not you, your fish can enjoy. And it's something that you can affix in one spot in the tank and let them chew on it versus it just blowing around like other foods. I recommend you get Coral Magazine because I am the executive editor. That means I'm in charge of it, and so I want everyone to be a subscriber. If you're not one yet, please do subscribe. There's the link on the page, on the screen. coralmagazine.com/Milev23 gives you a tiny little discount to save you a couple of bucks. The one-year subscription is $39 for 6 issues, and I hope you find the value in it. You're looking at the current cover of the magazine that is just now appearing in people's mailboxes. I offer consultation services. If you need some help with your aquarium and you need some one-on-one help, I'm here to do it. You can contact me at sales@milevsreef.com. So everyone, how are you doing? I'm a little bit late today. I had something to do, and I barely got back to the house. Here, I'll show you where I was. So my grandson had a soccer game, and I had to drive 260 miles round trip today to see him watch the game and get back here in time for the live stream. And I just wanted to let you know that he did a good job as goalie. All right, so there's some big news that happened yesterday. That's the part of the title you saw when you clicked on the link for this show, and that is that MASNA is no more. So I have the announcement here. I'm going to go ahead and read it because, that way you're caught up. So this was shared on MACNA's website. It was shared on social media. It was shared on coralmagazine.com. And it says, unable to regain its footing following COVID-era pandemic impacts, the Marine Aquarium Societies of North America, MASNA, founded in 1992, will cease operations. The organization responsible for supporting regional and local marine aquarium clubs and the entity behind the Marine Aquarium Conference of North America, MACNA, comes to a close after a 32-year run. The news was announced Friday, October 25th, with the following press release. It is with heavy hearts that the Board of Directors of the Marine Aquarium Societies of North America announces the closure of the organization. Despite our best efforts to revitalize MASNA and navigate the challenges of recent years, we've been unable to secure the necessary support to sustain our operations. MASNA proudly organized the Marine Aquarium Conference of North America, which for over 3 decades served as a thriving resource for aquarists to connect with peers, learn from experts, and grow their skills. We are forever grateful for the tens of thousands of attendees, hundreds of vendors, a wide range of sponsors, and upwards of 200 presenters over the years. However, like many in-person events, MACNA faced significant challenges during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. These impacts have contributed to the difficult decision we now face. As the sun sets on MACNA in its current form, we take pride in the meaningful contributions the conference has made to the marine aquarium community. Over recent years, the way we communicate and connect has shifted dramatically, reshaping the landscape for the organizations that serve our community. The growing dominance of digital platforms has transformed how knowledge and expertise are shared, but this evolution also highlights the need for a new, modernized MASNA-like community organization, a centralized hub where the marine aquarists can unite, collaborate, and succeed together. While MASNA must close its doors, the challenges we face today present an opportunity where something new can rise, a future organization that will meet the needs of the aquarists in this digital age. We believe that with the right vision, dedication, and community support, something new and even stronger could reestablish in its place, a community-driven platform that not only connects aquarists, but also upholds the passion and commitment to responsible practices that MASNA has always represented. The potential for a redefined MASNA remains, and perhaps one day we will see its revival adapted to the evolving needs of our community. For many years, MASNA served as a trusted source of knowledge and expertise, and as we move forward, we encourage all acquirers to remain diligent in their pursuit of excellence by continuing to seek out reliable, validated information. Exceptional, vetted sources of knowledge still exist, including respected print publications, many of which are now available digitally, offering both convenience and a reduced environmental impact. The MASNA board urges you to continue supporting the remaining community groups and locally owned brick and mortar fish stores. These pillars of our hobby are essential for maintaining the high standards that make aquarium keeping such a meaningful and rewarding experience. Without them, it may be too easy for the quality of the marine aquarium community to wane. Thank you for your unwavering dedication throughout the years. Though MASNA may be closing, the passion for marine aquarium hobby lives on through each of you. With gratitude, the MASNA Board of Directors. So, that's it. No more MASNA, no more MACNA. It's very sad, and unfortunately, there was just a couple of things that hindered it being a successful conference. And while there's lots of opinions and lots of debate, in my opinion, since this is my channel, I get to share that. Number one, COVID definitely did it in. People learned you didn't have to go somewhere because you could just watch a Zoom meeting and learn that way and stay home and stay safe. And that saves you money. And now in this economy in 2024, no one's got extra money to spend to go to a show. And so that affected both the attendance possibility of going to MACNA this year, and that's why so few people signed up. And the vendors looked and said, well, how many people are coming? Should we even bother doing a booth? Because it's expensive. And so that, the vendors are watching the attendees. The attendees are saying, well, where are the vendors? And the whole show got canceled. And having MACNA canceled 2 years in a row was basically the death knell for MASNA. Now, I do want to emphasize something that wasn't really expressed in this announced press release, but MASNA was always there to support the local clubs. And in 2024, there aren't a lot of fish clubs anymore. There used to be tons of them. And that's why it was called the Marine Aquarium Societies of North America. It was all the clubs under the MASNA umbrella. And every club was a member of MASNA, and that got them some perks. Number one, it helped get them speakers at a discount. The MASNA would help pay toward the speakers that were flying in to come speak to a club, like DFW Mass, my own club. If you were trying to form a club, they helped you. They told you how to do it. They gave you basically the guidelines, some kind of a manual to how to set up a club the correct way and what was expected. And over the years, there's been, clubs rising and falling. And at this point, lots of clubs have just completely imploded. And we've watched fish stores implode. I mean, the economy is terrible. I've been saying this for some time. It's fine to say your investments are doing well. If they are, that's great. But ultimately, how much extra spending money do you have this year compared to last year? And, most of us don't have surplus. We have enough. Or we're struggling. It's one or the other. Just read a news story yesterday that talked about how many businesses are shutting down because middle class and lower class just can't seem to break even each month and is just tightening their belts and is not going out to eat as much, not going and buying things as much, choosing to buy things online instead of walking into stores, to spend money in person. It's a thing. And I think that these two major contributors, COVID affecting, the conferences that had to be canceled, which the debt load was incredible that MASNA owed. And then, ultimately this year, there's just no one could afford to go. So, you guys still have a few more shows to go to. Reefapalooza continues on. Aquashella seems to be continuing on. Reef Stock is kind of revived. I think it was gone for a year or so, possibly after Jake's death. So, we've got a few shows. But MACNA was the educational show. It was the one, yes, it was great to have a ton of vendors to go look at a bunch of stuff. But it was a 3-day conference where you could go and hear 15 to 25 speakers and really learn about the hobby. And that was the point. When you think about it, MACNA was the only non-profit show Reefapalooza's for profit. Aquacella's for profit. Reef Stock, I don't know. But these different conferences have been really supersized frag swaps when you think about it. And while MACNA always had corals that you could buy, I mean, I was buying corals in 2002 at MACNA. But the show was there to really imbue knowledge. And I got a ton of it. I mean, that's how I became who I am today, was going to MACNA year after year, listening to people, learning from people, applying what I learned, sharing what I learned, and it grew into a website, which grew into a YouTube channel, which grew into a business. And, so that's where we are now. And, I'm glad that I got my MASNA award before MASNA went away. I mean, the timing was really, really close to missing that window. And, it was something I wanted for a super long time, and the fact that I got it was fantastic. I've been kind of mixed up on what the award was, because I've always known about Aquarist of the Year, and I really thought that's what mine was. But mine is not. Mine is the MASNA Award, which is more like a Lifetime Achievement Award, which is sort of like the Nobel Peace Prize for reef keeping. Very few people get it. And so the fact that I got it is fantastic, and, I'm grateful, and it's right there. I got it on the... Oh, let me... You can't even see it. Hang on, let's see if I can figure out the directions of this thing. I can. There it is, right there. So, okay, so that was the big news. I'm very sad that it happened, and there's nothing we can do about it. Will a new organization spring up? That sounds like it. I mean, it sounds like there's a possibility. I don't know who. I don't know when. I've had people immediately reach out to me and say, so MACNA 2.0? And yeah, it's going to happen next year. I haven't figured out the date. I haven't figured out exactly the plan. But I do plan to have air conditioning and electricity during this one. I do not plan to do a 24-hour show. So there's that. The question is when we'll do it. And I don't know yet. I really don't. I need to put my brain into it. And I've been so focused on... my business and, of course, Coral Magazine. Between those two, I mean, it's full-time work around the clock when you think about it. And I want to come up with something fresh for 2.0. I think it'll be fun, and I'd like it to be a little simplified. I'd like it to be enjoyable. I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go, but I want to put my head together with a few other people and see if we can come up with, like, a really cool concept for the next incarnation of MACNA. All right, so what I did was I went in, changing topics. I wanted to talk about water stations because it was requested. Could you discuss that this week on your show? And so I said, yes, I can do that. And so what I did is I went into Club Miller's Reef on Facebook, and I went ahead and I asked people to post their water stations, and I grabbed all the images that were submitted. And that way we could discuss these various water stations and look at them for inspiration. We're going to look at them together, okay? We're going to put the picture on the screen, and we're going to kind of nitpick it a little bit and see how each person did what they did. So we'll start off with me, just because I've had the same station now for 13 years, and this is it. So my water station is a 250-gallon poly tank that was put into the room before the walls were built, and it will not come out. I've tried everything. It's not possible. It's too big, and I kind of wish I had a 200-gallon instead of a 250, because a 200 would go out the door. I could take it to the driveway. I could clean it more easily with a garden hose and haul it back inside and hook it back up to the plumbing. But this thing here, I got it for $100. And it came with a bottle of vodka, and you can't argue with those kind of sales pitch. That sales tactic worked for me. So this is in the corner of the room. I have 9 inches of space above it, which is very little to pour salt in, and it's one of the reasons why I wish I had a 200-gallon instead of a 250. I've had people say, well, why wouldn't... As a matter of fact, the guy selling it to me wanted to sell me 2. He said one for fresh water, one for salt water. And I just looked at him and said, you're out of your mind. Why? Number one, this thing is enormous. Why would I want 2 of them? And he just said, well, because you need fresh water. And I thought about that for about a nanosecond, and I said, there's no way I need 250 gallons of fresh water ever in my life. I'm never going to need it. I need enough top-off water to top off the tank once a week. And I was estimating that my 400-gallon was going to evaporate about 7 gallons a day. That was my thought. So if I could have somewhere close to 40 gallons of top-off water, I was close to covered for a week. And then after I installed the top-off reservoir that fit under my aquarium, and I used every millimeter of space, I ended up with a 43-gallon container. And then I started measuring how much was evaporating, and it only evaporates 3.6 gallons a day. Not 7 gallons. Way less than I thought. And so I actually can go about 10 or 11 days on a single container filled to the top of RODI water. And so why would I need 250 gallons? That's craziness. So I instead just wanted one big container for salt water, because I feel that if you have a crisis, if something's really going wrong, and you need salt water, you need a lot of it. And the more the better. And with a 400-gallon tank, having 400 gallons of salt water would be perfect. I mean, that would be the dream. Because that way, if something really goes wrong and I had to do a 100% water change, which of course would throw chaos into my tank. But if I could manage it, I could basically eliminate the disaster that is happening. I've never ever needed that. I've had things happen over the years, as many of you are aware, but nothing was a crisis where I needed that much water. Instead, having 250, basically I could do a 50% water change if I needed to. And I have done a couple of really big water changes. I think the biggest I've ever done was 225 in a single day. But usually it was like 80 gallons here or 90 gallons there, maybe 125. It just depends how ambitious I was for that water change. And the nice thing is, having a big container like this with a lid on top to keep it sealed from the elements was the best way to avoid any kind of contaminants getting into it and allowing it to be good for many months. Now, my general rule of thumb is to always keep your salt water in circulation. So if you have a pump on it, and it's a DC pump, you can turn the flow way down to where it's just quietly moving very slowly. We're not needing turnover. We're not trying to oxygenate it. We're just trying to keep it from being stagnant. But if the water is in a container with a sealed lid, and like jugs, for example, that you get from the fish store, or buckets that you fill up and snap the lid down on top of, that water, even unmoving, is good for about 30 days. But if you have a bigger container that holds 55 gallons, 100 gallons, 150 gallons, 200 gallons, those kind, if you can put a circulation pump on there, even if it only comes on for a few hours once a day on a timer, you could do that and make it last for several months. Meaning that you could make a big batch of salt water and you could do smaller incremental water changes and the water's still good for many months. And there's no reason for it to go bad, because it's in a sealed container with a closed loop application, water just moving, circulating all the time. It's just like water circulating in your aquarium. The only difference is on your aquarium you have a whole bunch of filtration, but then you have a lot of corals and you have a lot of fish that are polluting it around the clock, so you need the filtration. The water in a saltwater vat that's just there mixed up ready to use shouldn't go bad sitting there as long as there's some circulation so it doesn't go stagnant, and it's covered and protected from any kind of contaminants that can get in that could spoil it. Now, if you ever doubt your salt water, if you ever just feel like it's been too long, it smells funny, it looks funny, yeah, toss it out and make a new batch. But I've very rarely had to throw away salt water in all the years I've been in the hobby. Okay, so that was my container. Let me just describe a little bit more about it before we move on. My container has 3 valves in that upper corner, which I can only make, oh good, I can make this picture pretty big. See the valves at the top there on the top right? There's 3 in a row, and one valve squirts water in the top pointing down so it breaks the surface. And then one comes out about the middle of the tank, and then one comes out down low in the tank. And this way I could circulate different levels of how much water was still remaining in the aquarium, in the poly tank, and I wouldn't get the thunderous sound. See, if water just goes in the top and the surface of water in the tank is very full, it just breaks the surface, it's quiet. But when I've used half the water and the water had to fall and then hit the surface of the water in half an empty tank, it got pretty loud. And then when I was down to maybe 25% of liquid volume in the container, it was like thunder. I'm trying to watch a movie and all I hear is this rumbling sound. So I added the down pipes to go further in the container where I could circulate the water, not break the surface. And the only reason I break the surface during mixing salt water is when I'm mixing a brand new batch with fresh salt. After that, I switch to a valve that enters lower in the vessel to just move the water without adding air into the water constantly, because I don't want to add CO2 to the water, which would depress the pH. It could start to cause the alkalinity to drop. You get some precipitation. All these things happen. And my RODI system is 25 feet away from it. It's over by the washer dryer, and the tubing goes through the ceiling and into the fish room and into that container into a float valve. So when I need to refill it, I just turn on the RODI system, let it bleed off 90 seconds of water, throw that away. Then I start pumping nice pure 0 TDS water into my vessel from the utility room. I don't lift a finger. And when the float valve rises to the top, no more water goes in, floor stays dry. I can turn off the RODI system, and then I can add the salt and let it start mixing. I usually do not mix salt and use it within 20 minutes. I'm much more apt to mix it for at least 24 hours in advance and then use it. And when I'm going to use it, I then verify my temperature, my salinity, my alkalinity, and I compare those three numbers to the reef tank to make sure all three match. And if they match, I can change as much water as I want. If you are doing smaller water changes or incremental water changes, or you're doing automated water changes where you change like 3 gallons a day, you probably don't need to worry much about the alkalinity level / pH level. That won't matter because you're putting so little into your tank each day. But you want to make sure the salinity is correct. And you want to check your salinity of your aquarium once a week just to make sure it's not wandering. Because with automatic water changes, your tank could potentially become too salty, or it could become hyposalinity. It could be low on salt. It just depends what's happening with the protein skimmer, what's happening with your salt water, what's happening with everything, evaporation. But it's the one thing when you do automatic water changes, you definitely want to make sure that your salinity is on track week after week. And I checked mine yesterday. The reef is 35 ppt or 1.0265. It's exactly where it needed to be. It was perfect. I was like, yes, I like that. And that's pretty much it. I do have this one valve here in the middle of the vat. That is where the water comes out. I have down on the floor is a Vectra M2, so the medium-sized pump. And because it's DC, I can turn it all the way down to 10% when I'm circulating the water, but I can turn it all the way up to 100% when I need to pump water. And I would then just open that orange handle right there, and then water would come out this hose, and I would use this hose and push it into the reef tank or into the frag tank. I probably will replace that hose. It's very, very rigid. I don't like that. I need something more bendy and flexible. And I think I'd like to put some kind of like a drinking water garden hose with no metal connections and put a valve on the end to like open and close it. And that way I can unspool the hose to wherever I need to go, like Caitlin's reef, this tank behind, oh, you can't see it, this tank behind me right here, just wherever. It would be really cool to have a big long hose to go to different rooms and do what I need to do and not have to worry about sloshing water all over the carpet and messing up my house. So that is basically everything about my water system. So let's look at this one. This one is from Alan Hoover. And we're going to make it as big as we can here. So it's clearly in what I would say is probably a basement. And you can see that he's got it elevated off the floor. Here, let's zoom in a little bit. I'm just going to cover myself here. I don't need to be on the camera. So he's got some storage underneath. He's got 2 equal-sized vessels. You can see the RODI system above and behind it where it's nice and safe. And that's something to keep in mind too. Wherever you're putting your RODI system, you want to make sure that it can drip, and and as you're changing filters, water comes out of the housings, that it won't get on your electrical and cause any problems. Now all his electrical's over here to the right. He's got some kind of a touch screen thing going on. Hey, that's my RODI system. I love it. And so I'm sure one of these is for freshwater and one is for salt. The one on the right definitely looks like freshwater based on the coloration. But I could be incorrect. It just usually they're kind of a light blue, and then once you add the salt to it, it becomes more of a gray color through the container. He's got a couple of valves on the bottom to control which way water is going to move. And he's got a valve right there in the center here where the water pumps out to wherever he's going to send it. So that's a nice clean setup. Thanks for sharing that, Alan. This one, we got to read this one. This one's from Brian Bench. And he put the before and the after. So his before was a manual mix station, 2 100-gallon, same footprint systems, plus, to mix up the RODI. And see how the water looks different in these containers? Here, I'll make it a little bit bigger. The one on the right's the fresh water. The one on the left clearly is the saltwater vat. And then he changed it to this one over here on the right, which looks like drawers. It's completely different. So it's an automatic mix station, 3 100-gallons, same footprints, but they stack apparently. It feels like 4, but I could be wrong. And he's got his ability to mix salt water in there. And you can see the buckets of salt at the bottom. So that's pretty complicated right there with a lot of fittings, a lot of zones. Interesting vessels. I need to learn more about what's going on here. All right. Then we've got Cameron Hall. He's got a system that many of you could relate to. So he used a couple of 55-gallon barrels. He's got his RODI system up here on the wall. I can't make out which one that is. And he's got a whole bunch of doses on the wall there. And then down here you can see he's got a lid on top of one barrel and a lid on the other. And we can't quite see all the connections, but you can see there's a lot of plumbing involved here. So basically when you set these up and you get water in one vessel, let me move this camera over a little bit here again. Oh, the other way. My camera wants to do its own thing today. Okay, so when you've got these type of vessels, normally you're going to put plumbing down low or up high or both on each container. And that's because you want to put water in the top and you want it to go down. And then you want, of course, the saltwater side wants to mix with salt and then come out the bottom and into a pump to move it to wherever it's got to go, like pump it into the reef tank nearby. Now, I can see he's got all kinds of hoses here as well, and you've got the 2 different valves. So why there are these valves there? Well, when the saltwater barrel is empty, you could change 2 valves and basically open them up to move water from the freshwater barrel with the pump into the saltwater barrel. And once it's full, close those valves, and now you have a container that was used for saltwater in the past, filled with RODI, ready for salt, and you have an empty container next to it. All the RODI has been pumped into the saltwater container. Now you can refill the freshwater. That's why there's these extra valves. And being able to then isolate the water moving with that pump through the saltwater constantly is ideal. And you're not having to take a mag pump, stick it on a hose, and drop it into the barrel itself to mix your salt. Instead, you've got a nice external pump to create the circulation. And ideally, the pump is a silent pump. Hopefully, it's low energy. So there's all the benefits of having this nice system that is basically in place, and you're not carrying around things that are wet. If you have to put a pump into a bucket and pump water into your tank, when you're done, you've got the hose and the pump, and it's got to go somewhere, and you're dripping on the floor. But with this setup where it's sitting in the corner of the room, the pump stays where it is. The plumbing stays. All you do is do one connection to the assembly through a union probably, or maybe some kind of a quick disconnect with the hose that you'll carry over to the aquarium, fill it up, and then when you're done, you can just disconnect it and coil it up and put it back on top of the barrel. Very convenient. And the 55-gallon barrels can be pretty cheap. I remember buying a couple of mine. I have 3, I believe, for like $20 each from a farm supply on the side of the highway. I saw it and I was like, oh, used barrels? Fantastic. What was in them? And they said Dr. Pepper syrup. I was like, done. If you can drink Dr. Pepper and not die, I can use this container for my salt water. And I still use those barrels from time to time. Okay. Carl is a big fan of those buckets, those barrels. So this is Carl Beals. He's one of our moderators for Club Mueller's Reef. And he has got a very special mixing tool right there. Do you guys see that? He's got a plastic spoon, I guess. inserted or mounted inside a battery-powered drill. So that way you can mix things up without having to move your arm around. I love it. So he's got what looks like 4 55-gallon barrels. On the front of that one barrel here, you can see that there's a tube running down, and there's a whole bunch of markings on there. I'd love to know what all those labels say. I'll have to get with Carl later on to find out, because it looks like one of those word games. But he also has a sediment filter at the top up there, which he can then pump through the sediment filter to catch any kind of particulates and have nice clear water going into his aquarium. Now this one here is probably in a garage, based on looking at the studs on the wall, the tar paper backing, and you got some tile on the floor. So he's got a nice little system right there that works. He has a rather large tank, so having 4 of these in a spot that doesn't take a lot of space is ideal, because these types of barrels are small enough to fit through a doorway. Very convenient to use, easy to take outside to rinse out and clean, and then bring them back in. And these, the lids come off completely. Mine had what was called a bung hole, and you had to remove the bung, and then you had basically, I don't know, 2.5, 3 inches of space to do something, which didn't really work for me. So I ended up cutting out a 6-inch radius hole, and that way I could drop in a mag pump, and I could go ahead and hook a hose to it and carry that. And I used to pump water from the sump through the open door going to my kitchen, which went to the sink, and usually the hose didn't come out of the sink. Sometimes it did. And I would just turn on the pump and let it just dump water down the sink drain. And then when I was done, I would take the pump out of the sump, put it in my saltwater barrel, take the hose off the sink, put it inside the sump, and pump saltwater back into my sump. That was the old days. That was 2004 to 2010. Then when I did the new fish room, I never had to do that again. Okay, we'll get rid of that one. Dan Bulski has a nice system I like, because not only does he have 2 different size containers, one for freshwater, one for salt. The bigger one is for salt, I can tell already. And then he's got to the left here, he's got a nice mop sink, so he can do a lot of his cleanup and his aquarium stuff, and just a tidy spot that's not the kitchen counter. So way to go, Dan. I'm proud of you for doing that. And I like that he has a lot of clearance on the top to go ahead and add the salt in easily. The freshwater container, as you can see, has the different plumbing. The only fitting, I don't know what's going on there. It might be for venting possibly, I'm not sure. But he's got a fitting going straight up there at the top. And there's nothing on it, but I'm curious where that goes. But that's a nice clean setup. And then also, again, why are these up so high? They're on top of a platform, so you could actually point a nozzle downward, and you could walk up and put a bucket there, open the valve and fill the bucket before, the few gallons of water, and then carry it to its destination. That is one of the reasons why it's not sitting directly on the floor. David Hicks has 3 containers. He's got one for RODI. We can tell which one, right? He's got one for salt, and then he's got this cone-shaped one, which is pretty interesting. Let me make this bigger. So you can see the RODI system in the upper left corner. You can see the back wall is all made of concrete. And he's got definitely quite a bit of plumbing there to make this all operate. There's a sediment filter on this system as well. That's interesting. Several people are using sediment filters, probably to make sure their water comes out crystal clear. And then he's got some very long hose sitting on top right there that could use, be assembled to the quick disconnect, use it to bring the water where it needs to be, and then coil it back up and put it up top. Let me take a break here for a second and talk a little bit about cleanup, because there's a few things that you need to know. So first of all, the hose that you use to move water out of the tank or to pump water into the tank, when you're done, you want that hose to be completely empty if at all possible. You don't want the water to sit inside that hose where it could become stagnant, anoxic, grow algae, all those things. We want it to be all cleaned out if at all possible. What I typically do is I will take the hose to the driveway and I will raise up one end, and then I just keep lifting to make sure all the water comes out, and then I coil it up and I bring it back inside and put it in the fish room near my big container. If you leave water in there, then when you've do need to use the hose later and you're sending water into your tank, whatever's sitting in the hose that's old and has been sitting for too long could be toxic. And you could be putting in a few quarts of dirty water that could possibly hurt your tank. And it's just a little bit, but we don't want to do anything that could risk our system. Now the containers, all of his containers look nice and clean. He's doing a good job keeping them clean. I really want to know what the third one's for. I almost feel like he wants to grow a massive amount of phytoplankton, but I know that's not the case. But the nice thing about his containers, they're marked. You know how many gallons there are in each section, so you can anticipate how much you're going to need or how much you're going to use. But they're clean on the inside, which means that he's found a way to clean them by, usually there's a couple of methods. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of some of the different approaches you can use. The first one would be to take it outside, lay it on its side, and take a garden hose and blast it. But a lot of times there's sediment that sticks to the walls. It doesn't come off easily. So what I prefer to use is muriatic acid. Now that is the nuclear option. It works really, really well. And muriatic acid can etch your concrete. So when you're using it, you need to basically flood the area with water first, then use the acid in the container. That way, if any spills on the concrete, there's like a water barrier there. It's there to dilute the acid a little bit. If acid does get on the concrete, take your garden hose and hit it really quick to dilute it some more. And what you do is you put the acid in the container and you just rock the container back and forth, or you tilt it like the square one. You would tilt it to make the acid run down the walls. And then, you turn it 90 degrees and make that acid do the next wall, and then the next wall, and the next wall. And it just melts the stuff off instantly on contact. It's so good, so fast. The fumes are incredibly strong. And it's best to wear a face respirator. I have one that has 2 filters in it. I've been using the same one for years because I only have to put it on for a once-a-year cleaning, so I'm using it for 20 minutes. I just don't think the filters are going to wear out anytime soon. And since I can't smell anything, I know they're working. If I was choking on gases, I would know, and I'd know I have to get new filters. But if you're doing it outdoors, that already helps immensely with having fresh air for what you're doing. If you're doing indoors, definitely wear the face mask. And I'm not talking about the mask from COVID. I'm talking about this crazy thing like a painter would use with 2 big filters on it. And I've done it in the past. It works really, really well. My eyes don't water. My lungs don't burn. It's perfect. You just want to make sure that you're using eye protection, and you want to wear gloves so you don't get burned on your skin. And so anyway, that's my way of doing it because it's instantaneous. I can literally use the acid in a pest control sprayer and just mist the walls, and the stuff goes down the walls and all the dirt just drops to the bottom, and then I can flush it out with a garden hose and a lot of fresh water, and it goes away. Now, if you don't want to go that route, if you want to do something different, you could use vinegar. It takes a lot of vinegar. It's much, much slower. There's a lot more elbow grease. The third choice is to use peroxide. Now, if you use 3% peroxide, it's very, very weak diluted stuff. It can work, but it's not going to work very well. But if you can get your hands on the 30% peroxide, the stuff that if a drop gets on your skin immediately turns like completely white and it looks like dead flesh. You don't want to get that on your skin, okay? And I've used that 30% peroxide before in my container. It cleaned it completely. There was no odor. Again, I was very cautious with it. I made sure not to get any on me. I did a lot to flush it all away when I was done. So these are some of the different approaches to cleaning it. And then finally, the last approach you could use, which is readily available, is bleach. And you could use bleach and water to scrub the walls of your container. And your container may be a little too hard to reach inside. You might want to use like a mop of some kind that you could take and you could dunk it in the bleach water and then take the mop and rub it down the walls and scrub. You could do something different, like, I don't know, wrap a t-shirt around a broom and use the t-shirt fabric to rub the walls to get the stuff off. But when you're done with the bleach, you've got to rinse it really well, and you need to leave it outside for 24 hours for the sun basically to bake off the chlorine fumes, which they'll evaporate in the sunlight, and now the container is completely safe to use again. Anytime you're done with any type of deep cleaning on your container, if you're still unsure, if you're concerned, if you're worried, you could fill it up with tap water and use some dechlorinator, something like Prime, and just put that in there, let it soak overnight, dump it all out. Now it's completely safe to use, and you can go ahead and put it back into position, reconnect all your unions on your plumbing, and start filling it up with water. These containers should be cleaned at least once a year. That's best practices. If for some reason your container seems more foul than it needs to be a little sooner, you could do it twice a year. Okay. Let's see. Donnie Welch said his container is inside a garage. I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it. So if you'll notice, he's completely covered them up with insulation like you would put around a water heater. And he also has chillers on there. And he has fans in the front of the chillers to blow fresh air over the chillers to get the heat away from the chiller so it can chill the water so he can use it on his reef tank. He also said he had inline heaters to use it to heat in the winter. So no matter what the temperature of his garage is, if it's crazy hot or super cold, he has water he can use for his reef tank through his water station using chillers, heaters, fans, and insulation. Elaine says because she only has a nano, her water mixing station looks like this. I had to share it with you all. She said that's a 2.5 gallon jug. She puts her salt in it. She uses her 2 arms to shake it well, get it mixed up, and then she can do her little water change. Eric Cohen shared some from, he runs Tank Stop, which is a company that sells really nice exotic fish. And this is the container that they have. They have several. You can see more in the background. And there they are pouring salt in. They've got a nice platform to stand on to work. And I guess he's got some markings how many gallons. Like that must be a 300-gallon container, it looks like. Now, if you're thinking, I really want to do a station like this, but I don't understand all the plumbing, you can make it as complicated as you want it to be. But essentially, if you have a hole near the bottom of the barrel and you have a hole near the top of the barrel and you have a pump on the floor next to the container and you run a pipe from the barrel into the pump and then you run a pipe from the pump up and into the barrel, that is it. That's the simplest approach. We're just having water go into the pump, pump up, push in, pour salt. The water keeps doing this. The salt is mixing. Boom. Bob's your uncle. It's that simple. So why are there extra T's and extra ball valves? Well, okay, so like before I talked about how if you had one container next to a second container and the first container is filled with RODI water, how do you get the water out of one container into the other? If you just had it where the two are plumbed together with a valve in between and you open the valve, you can't get all the water from one container into the other. It just won't happen. What'll happen is it'll equalize and you'll have equal amounts of water in both containers. If you had salt water in there before, some left over, and you open the valve, some salt water will go into your fresh water, some of the fresh water will go into the salt water, and you end up with sort of semi-salty water on both sides. That's pointless. So we don't do that. Instead, you want to have plumbing on the one barrel with a pump, and you can have one pump that does both containers. It's those ball valves that make the difference because we can now close a valve that won't allow it to push water up, and now it's going to push water over from the freshwater container straight into the saltwater mixing container. And then once it's filled up to the top and the other container is empty, close that valve, and now you can isolate for the mixing of the salt water. It's that simple. And then if you add another T-fitting and some plumbing, you can now have a spot to connect tubing to push water out and into your fish room, your aquarium, where you need to send it. Okay. What you doing, Jackie? Hey, baby. She's super active, I can tell. She missed me. I was gone for 6 hours. Poor thing. This one is from Graham Tether. So he's got a couple of 55-gallon barrels. He's got a couple of buckets of salt there. It's up on a wooden frame. He's got some jugs in the front for handiness. And he's got what looks like green tubing to move the water where it needs to go. You can also see he's got the blue tubing on the top for RODI systems. And that's just coiled on top for what he needs. He can move it to somewhere else if he wanted to. It'd be a good way to refill top of containers. And it's a nice clean system. There's no drips. There's no runs. I don't see any pumps. So it might be that he puts pumps inside and then pushes water out from that container. Hernando Rocha, my friend in Florida, has one of these big containers that I think usually go on the side of houses to collect rainwater. And he posted the picture, but he didn't reply to the question. One person said, "Aren't you worried about the weather?" Now, I know the weather in Florida tends to be kind of decent all year round, but it can get a little warm. So if your water is too warm outside when you bring it in, you're going to have to let it cool off before you can use it in your aquarium. We don't want to bring in 90-degree water and use it in our reef. We need it to be as close as possible to the reef itself. If your tank is 78, we want the salt water that's going to go in to be 78. So what do you do if you have this big container outside? You could pump water inside into like a 55-gallon barrel for a holding place and leave it there overnight and let it become room temperature. If your room temperature is colder than 77, and your water is getting too cold, you can put a small heater inside the barrel with a power head, some kind of pump just to move it a little bit and basically get the water up to maintain 77 degrees. Also, you'll notice here on his fitting, he's got a quick disconnect right there to where he could connect the hose he's going to use. I believe that Hernando does more than just his own tank. I think he also does maintenance for other tanks. So there's a good chance that he's mixing up big batches of salt water to take to his clients, and he probably fills up all the jugs, puts them in the truck, and off he goes. This is a simple station for someone with a smaller tank, just using a couple of buckets. And, it doesn't take much. I used to wish I could find some kind of a 10-gallon bucket for my 29-gallon when I was running that tank, because 5 gallons wasn't enough, and I really needed 10. And I was like, man, if I could just find the perfect 10-gallon container, that'd be so nice, because mixing up salt in 2 5-gallon buckets and making them match was hard. You'd think it'd be simple, put the same amount of water, put 2.5 cups of salt in each one, boom. But invariably, one would be 1.024, 1.027, and my tank is, 1.026. So I really wanted to have just one container. So I ended up finding something different that I used for a long time that worked for me. But I started off with just the simple buckets. And a lot of times, the bucket we buy the salt in is your mixing bucket for the rest of your life. Buckets are so valuable. And in this hobby, we tend to have many of them. But with smaller tanks, you can definitely have this nearby. You can use one for a top-off container if you want, and you can just fill it up with water easily and then just let an automated system move water in as needed. And then, of course, when you're ready to do a water change, you're going to need at least an empty bucket, because when you're draining water out, you never want to drain out more than you're going to put in. So if you were to just pump water out of your tank down a sink or out the window or something, and you just got rid of an undetermined amount of water, then when you refill your tank and you run out of salt water, you've got to make more in a hurry, and that's never fun. So it's always good to know you have enough salt water on hand to do your full water change. So if you're going to pump out 4 gallons, you put in 4. You don't want to pump out 20 and only have 10 ready. That's what I'm saying. Jason Kretsch has a very nice setup. Beautiful. And this is 2 equal-sized containers. He's got jugs beneath it. He's got the fittings to fill up jugs right there at the bottom. His RODI system is up on the wall there. It's in a nice secure bunker with the concrete walls. This might be, possibly he's got automatic water changes going on here too. I think I see the RO Buddy, or the Booster Buddy, I think it's called, that helps do all kinds of extra things with your RODI system. He's got 3 DIs on there. He's got a nice mop sink there for washing things out and cleaning up. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. This is very, very nice. Very clean. I like it. If you're wondering where you can get these containers from, US Plastic sells them. There's some other companies on the market. The downside of these containers is that they're so expensive. And it's not the container itself that gets you, it's the shipping. You find some container, that's perfect, I love it. It's $200. I'm like, great. Shipping is $200. I'm like, what? That makes it $400. Yeah, that's what it is. But you can sometimes find them at places like Northern Tools, farm and tractor supplies. And if they don't have what you need, you could ask them to order you one. And when they bring in their supplies, they bring in your container, and maybe you won't pay the shipping because they're bringing in stuff anyway on their truck. And so they just show up with your container. There might be, whatever. There's a markup, obviously, but you may not have to pay that double, because the fact that whatever the container costs, the shipping is the exact same. It's awful. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's just huge. So there's a big shipping freight cost, even though it's not crazy heavy. It's not that you're bringing in tons of weight. It's just expensive. So just want to let you know that. Jason Myers has a nice setup here. This is inside a closet. This might actually be under a staircase. And you've got two smaller containers. They might be 40 or 50 gallon containers each, and they sit there nicely against the wall. I like that they're square. It's kind of a nice change of pace. I'm used to seeing round everywhere. So this is a very clean setup. And you can see he's got a very small pump there at the bottom. I don't remember what brand that is. The yellow ones. Let me see if I can move this up here. All right, we'll just have to do this to make it show up. Can I zoom in there? I can't make it out. I feel like I've seen that before, but I can't remember who makes that. All right. Reef Keeper says, by the way, Brute makes a 10-gallon gray trash can for the smaller tanks. And you're absolutely right. And I have seen that. And you can get the rolling dolly underneath, too. Another thing you should know, that whenever you are moving water through your home, you should never, ever, ever push the barrel ahead of you. You always pull it toward you. And the reason being is that when you push it forward, when the wheel stops turning, the container just goes over, and then you got 55 gallons of water in your house. It's a lot of water. Or 33 gallons, or whatever size trash can you've got. So always pull it towards you. As you come up on a threshold of a doorway, you're going to lift up a little bit and get it over that hump and then into the next room. Always pull. If you do buy any kind of specialized container, make sure you get the matching lid. If you can get the rolling dollies underneath, even better. They make some that like lock onto the bottom, the barrel. They just like, you put the trash can down and you twist it and locks it, and they stay as one unit. That's really ideal. So there's no way that you're like pulling and you pull it right off of its rolling dolly. Here's a setup using a couple of Brute trash cans. We just talked about Brute. This is from Keel Brooks. And he made a wooden stand or wooden platform where the lower trash can is easily accessible. And then the one on top is sitting on a platform. It's got to be made of 2x4s. This is probably 2x4s. And then it's got a wood decking on the top because that's a lot of weight. And that's something that a lot of times people don't really consider, just how crazy heavy water is. When we say it's 10 pounds a gallon, well, if you've got 33 gallons, you got 330 pounds of water. If you have a 55-gallon barrel, 550 pounds of weight on a 2 foot by 2 foot spot. So that's a lot of direct weight going down. You make sure that stand is very sturdy, very strong. And see, the beauty of like this setup that he's got right here, not only does he have this nice wooden frame that keeps everything nice and tidy and supports the system, he left himself room for clearance to lift the lid to add the salt. The top is always going to be the fresh water. You never put salt on the top. The reason being is you want to add salt into the container, so you want to add it to the one that's easy to reach. So you fill the top one with RODI water, and then when you need to fill your bottom barrel, you're going to just open a valve, and gravity will drain the top barrel completely into the bottom barrel, and then you can close the valves, and you can start refilling the top barrel again, and then the bottom, you just lift the lid off, add the salt, turn on the pump, let it mix. Super nice and convenient. And you'll notice that on the left side of the frame, there is a spot with the electrical right there. And that way he's got that actually secured in place to where you can go ahead and plug everything in. Your hands stay dry. The electrical is not in a spot where it's going to get wet in theory. It's nice and safe. Yeah, very nice setup. And then obviously the very bottom here, I do want to point this out, where the plumbing is coming out of the container and then going into your pump. He did a very nice job. It's very clean. You just want to be aware that you never break that fitting off. I mean, you just don't want to accidentally step on it and snap it off. or drop something heavy on it and break it off, because then you got to rebuild. And it looks to me like he used uniseals rather than bulkheads for these fittings, and which is great. So a uniseal is a hard rubber grommet. You would drill a hole that matches the uniseal size. So the outer part of the uniseal might be this big, but the inner part is probably about this big. And so you'll drill the smaller hole, and then you jam this thing in, and then you've got to insert a PVC pipe through the center of the uniseal, and that will stretch the uniseal out to create a watertight barrier so no water comes out. Works really well. Now, I'll tell you a little trade secret. I came up with this many years ago, and people laughed at me because they said, only you. But if you can get your hands on some Astroglide, it's a lot easier to put that PVC pipe into the uniseal. The next person that shared a water station was Kenny Parrott, who runs a fish store. And look at these beautiful containers. They're nice, big, graduated. They're on a nice steel stand, it looks like. He's got his RODI system at the top. He's got a series of outlets way up high where they'll stay nice and dry. He's got his filter wrench down here low. The containers are easy to get into. They're completely wide open. I don't see any lids whatsoever, though they do make lids that fit on these types of containers. They sit on top and have like a little flange. So kind of imagine sort of like a squarish frisbee that would sit on top with a flange around it, and you could just lift the lid off. But these are wide open for whatever reason. Maybe they were just setting this up at the time because it looks very brand new to me. I don't even see the pump, but very clean setup, and really easy to work in, very easy to clean out. So this one here would be fantastic for taking them outside, rinsing them out, getting them cleaned up, bringing them back inside. Triggerfish says they're not uniseals. He says they're very heavy-duty bulkheads from Home Depot. Interesting. All right. Well, I like the uniseals. I think they're great. I use them on my big container. If you are using bulkheads on a curved container, you need to find the flattest spot you can find, because bulkheads really don't like curves. Or you got to find bulkheads made for curved containers. That's the other choice. There may be some kind of maybe there's even a 3D printed solution that you can put on the container and then put the bulkhead through and then do the whole thing. But I would think you need to probably order some kind of a 3D printed flexible material like the RFGs from VCA that's printed rubber, because you need that seal. You don't want it to leak, you know. But if you try to put a regular bulkhead on a round container, you're going to have problems. But if you get those square ones I showed you earlier, perfect. It's a nice flat surface. So this is Mark Witcher's water station. Look at that. He goes to his local fish store and just fills up the buckets and brings them home. And look at all that water on the ground. That place is just a mess. But yeah, so that's another choice. You can always get your water from the fish store. Michael McDermott has some very nice industrial containers. I forget what size these are, but they're big. I mean, 300 gallons, 400 gallons, I can't tell. But I've seen these before with these big metal cages, and they absolutely need those cages. You might say, well, I just want the container. But the cage is what holds the container, because the container, it's kind of soft. It's kind of bendy, and that frame will keep it from blowing out like a overinflated milk jug. And but yeah, these will work great. And man, it just looks like he has 4 of them there. I mean, this is massive. I need to find out what he's taking care of. And you can see the RODI systems in the back. Oh, Mitch is right here. It says 350 gallons each. 350-ish. Thanks, Mitch. Did I spell your name wrong? I thought it says here McClintock, but I wrote McDermott. I'm sorry. Maybe I got that wrong, or using a different name on Facebook. I thought I got everyone's names correctly as I was doing this. But very nice containers. You can see they've got this large valve at the base to open and close when you're needing to seal it off, or you want to open it up to work on it. And also keep in mind that when you do this type of plumbing near the bottom, Having a valve near the system and then more plumbing thereafter allows you to replace plumbing when something needs to change later on down the road. So if you set up everything with absolutely no ability to make changes later, you'll end up replacing everything on the bottom. You'll have to go from the bulkhead all the way out to every single bit of it. But if there's some free space where you can have some basically blank pipe, that's a spot you could cut later to put a union or to add something or change something or whatever. Also, you'll notice that in this example here, you've got probably 1.5 inch pipe right there coming out 1.5 inch. If there's any reason that you need more flow, more volume, you would actually upsize the plumbing to be a little bit bigger, like 2 inches or larger, and that would let you push water more rapidly up back into the container, for example, versus restricting it. Because the bottom pipe, like I said, looks like 1.5 inches, and then the vertical going up looks to me like 1 inch. It's not as big as the stuff on the bottom, right? But if it was me, I would have immediately increased the size of the pipe going up to a larger pipe and then shrunk it down if I needed to, like he did at the top here going in. That looks like a 1 inch fitting. But it could have been 2 inches going up vertically and then reduced to 1. Or it could have been 2 inches up, 2 inches across into a 2 inch bulkhead going in the top. You could actually have a lot more flow that way, and you're not restricting what the pump can push out. A lot of times when we're doing these kind of things, we think about the pump itself, and it has a 1 inch outlet. It's like, oh, okay, well, it needs to be 1 inch plumbing. But you can actually upsize, and you can make it bigger to move more volume. They can totally do that. Oh, okay. Mitch says it's not a system, it's just coincidence. It's crazy. I was talking about something. Okay. This next one is another system that I like. This one here is from Nathan Mahan. And these are kind of a different shape. Again, the top container, you can tell it's fresh water because the color of the water is kind of that lighter bluish, clearish. And then the bottom looks more dirty because it was mixed with salt and becomes darker. And so again, you fill up the top with the RODI water, and then when it's time to refill your vessel on the bottom, you would just open valves and let gravity drain it all into the bottom container, close the valves, and refill the top container again. Super easy to use. He's got some clear, flexible tubing here that he moves wherever he needs to send it to pump water around. He's got multiple valves. Oh, I do want to also mention this. This is why I'm looking at these pictures here to discuss with you about inspiration. Now, first of all, I want to say that these containers are really nice and they're very stable. They have a nice flat bottom. They're pretty good about mixing and not having sediment at the base, which is ideal because if you have a big, flat, wide area, you could end up having a lot of just sediment. But this here, it kind of brings it to the center and it gets out. It just drains out and moves, circulates. It's a good system. Now, I want to mention the valves. You can see there's some blue valves. You can see there's some black valves. On that last picture I showed you, there was those other ones that were red. Each valve comes from a different company. And the ones that are the best are the orange valves that are called JF, which I believe stands for John Fisher. The John Fisher valves are always easy to turn. And the ones that you get from Home Depot and Lowe's are always super hard to turn. And it's really important that you open and close those valves frequently to avoid them freezing into place. It is possible to have a valve that you just haven't touched in years, and when you finally say, I need to close this valve, and you use all your might to do it, it just snaps off. And you're like, oh my God, now what? So using John Fisher valves, the JF valves that are orange handled, they're easy to turn, they're super convenient. They also can be sold as double union ball valves, and that means there's a union at each end, which means you can remove it to replace it easily with a fresh one, which is really nice versus having to cut and glue and add a coupling to make up for what you removed. And then also any unions you've used anywhere on any of the plumbing, anywhere where there's a union. And the union is, we'll zoom in on this picture right here. I don't know that you guys can see my mouse, and so I'm going to assume you can't. Oh, you can? I don't know. On the container itself, there is a pipe coming out of the container with a blue handle, and right after the blue handle is a funny-looking squarish white thing. That's a union. When you get a union, and you unscrew it to install it, you'll have a threaded part, and then you'll have the collar that you put around, that you tighten around the threads. You want to put silicone grease all over those threads every single time you undo a union. And that way, when you have to undo a union one day, it will unscrew. And it will not be frozen in place where you're having to kill yourself to get it loose. So always put silicone grease on every union. It's food grade, it's safe. They sell it at Home Depot and Lowe's. It's not hard to come by. It's not expensive. It may be in a Carmex case. It may be in a little toothpaste case. And it looks like silicone. It really does. You know, it doesn't have that horrible smell. And you just apply it, and then you just rub it on all the threads with your finger, and then you just screw the fitting together, and you're done. This next picture is from Nico. I'm sure I'm going to botch his last name. Arguelles. And he must run Seco Corals. And you can see he's got a couple of large containers in the back behind that frag tank. Those are probably 150 gallons or so. I could be off. Maybe they're a little smaller. But nice, durable containers, easy to take outside and clean. He used black plumbing instead of white PVC, which is a nice change of pace. And it's right there near the tanks where he has to do his work. This is a nice small container. You can kind of get a sense of scale with the dog there in the background. And it looks to be on a large rolling dolly. So this may not be a very big container. It may hold 35, 40 gallons of water. It has a nice access point at the top to pour in the salt. And they're just doing everything manually here. So they've got the wires are going in. There's probably a pump and a heater. And you can just prop the lid up to get those in. Again, you can't seal this container properly to keep salt water good for a long time with the wires in there. So you'd either have to modify something to get the wiring through the top, or you're going to have to remove those two things to close the lid just to protect it from contaminants. And this one here would be one of those ones where you're going to roll it around very carefully. I would assume this one would be really hard to pull because there's nothing really to grab onto, which means it's a pushing thing. I would hope that the lid is screwed on tight when you're pushing, because if it does get caught and flips over, you're going to have water everywhere. Ray Fleming has a nice two-system reservoir. And I'm trying to see. I can't see those numbers. Too bad. But it's a nice setup. He's using red PVC pipe for his plumbing. He's got quite the RODI system over there on the left with triple DIs on the bottom, it looks like. He's got a booster pump on there, 2 membranes, a couple of dosers from Neptune Systems, and he's got some blue pipe at the bottom. So he's got red pipe to indicate water going up, which is a visual, and then the blue pipe is the water at the base. So very nice, clean setup, easy to use, fresh water on the right, salt water on the left. See, you're starting to recognize it too, aren't you? You're starting I can tell which one's the clean water. This one is from Rick Childs, and he's got nice big signage on there, RODI and salt. He's got the nice sink. I'm very jealous of the sink. Also, you'll look at all the cable management that's going on here. He's got even his RO tubing. Everything's clipped to the wall. Nothing is loose. I see 2 booster pumps. He's got the dual membrane on his RODI system with double DI on the right. What else do we got going on here? What is up here? I can't tell. Some kind of. I do see the EBA32 up here, but I can't tell what the black things are down at the bottom. This is probably an automatic water change system too for the aquarium. And then he's got valves at the bottom to easily fill up buckets to carry from room to room, which is never fun, but at least it's easier than trying to pump water out of the top and into a bucket. Ronald Yorkman just set up his system. He's not even done. He's got his decor in the background there at the top. And he's got a couple of nice containers on a nice platform near a sink. His containers are actually pretty high up when you look at the height of that sink as well as the height of the platform. But, there's a nice area for storage where you could put buckets and boxes of salt beneath. So that is going to be completed soon. And then Steve's Reefs Ponds is the name of his business, I believe. So he's got a couple of nice containers, big ones. And then he's got a big sediment filter at the top that is filthy. Here, I'll show you a close-up. Look at that thing. It's really trapping some stuff. So he really likes his nice clean water. But it's nice, easy to get to. It's got a lot of concrete blocks there. I do want to point out, okay, I'm gonna always bring this up anytime somebody does this. So Steve, if you happen to be watching this, I'm sorry to tell you, the concrete blocks on their side that have the holes going through, that is the wrong way to put them. You've got them all like that, it looks like. Maybe the bottom ones are correct. But the ones that we can see that are on their side, and then probably the layer on top, those are all supposed to face up. Concrete blocks are much stronger with a hole going downward. And ideally, when they make a wall, they pour concrete into the holes to make it strong. But on its side, these blocks are weaker. Now he's got a whole bunch of them. You're only trapping, 1,000 pounds of water here. It's probably okay. But whenever you do these, always do it where you can't see the holes. That's all I'm telling you. And then our final person for today was Will Wiggins. And I said, show us your water station. So here's his. He gets it from the ocean. He's cheating. It's just not fair. And actually, someone immediately commented saying, you're getting it right there at the shore? Usually, I believe you want to get the water from a little bit out. Go out there with a boat or something to not get water right at the shoreline where things can get, again, we're always worried about contaminants. But, this is just him collecting the water. He's pumping it into this blue reservoir that's on some kind of a trailer. Maybe he pushes it through a filter next, and then, maybe runs carbon, and then it's ready to use. That's possible. But ideally, when we do get water from the ocean, we want to make sure that we are getting it from a nice, safe area where there's no runoff, there's no pollution, there's not vehicles with oil dripping out of them, there's not boats with leaking engines or fuel, all that stuff, We just want to get water where it's safer to use it. So that was our last water station. That's the most realistic one of all of ours. And I hope that this kind of gave you some ideas or some inspiration or just some entertainment. There is really a lot to consider when it comes to these. And ultimately, the reason we have these containers is to make our life easier when it comes to doing water changes. If you feel like any of these are overkill and they're unnecessary, it's a personal choice. Just like having a certain type of vehicle or a certain type of smartphone. Everyone's got an opinion. I totally get that. But ultimately, whatever can make your life easier to take care of your aquarium and to do what you need to do for the maintenance, that's what you should implement. And if you can set up an area that has a lot of storage space and you can have a nice big container of salt water available, think about it. You could, like, for example, when I used to use a brand of salt called Saibon, came from China, my big container, mathematically, 6 bags of that salt was exactly the right salinity. It was so easy. I didn't have to do any math. I just had to bring in 2 boxes, pour the salt in the top, and I was done. Now, with the Fritz salt that I'm using now, I did choose to get the 200-gallon boxes, but I asked for them to be 4 bags inside the box. They sell it both ways. It can be 1 big bag in the box, or it can be 4 small bags. A box of salt from Fritz is 57 pounds, and I know this because I weighed it. So the individual bags tend to be between 11 and 13 pounds. That is doable for carrying up a ladder and pouring into my container. And because I can weigh these individual bags, I can use a salt, it's a salt calculator is what it is. And I can tell the calculator I have 250 gallons of water. Right now, the salinity is 1.005. I want it to be 1.026. And then I say, how much salt do I need? And it spits out 88.78 pounds of salt. And then I will grab my bags one by one and I'll add it all up. And I was like, okay, I need to use this many bags, and I can pour it in. And when I'm done, it's 35 ppt or 1.026. It's so nice. So I really do like that I can use a calculator for that, since I can't just use 6 bags and be done. I mean, that was the dream. It worked for a long time till I stopped using that salt. But, it's okay. If I can just weigh it out, I know what I'm needing. And I only have to mix salt water, every so often, because I have such a vast amount. And then I can go through my systems and I can change a little water on this little tank here for the Blenny, or I can change, 5 or 10 gallons on that tank behind me. Caitlin's reef's the same thing. And then the big reef just gets big water changes because I'm always trying to fix something. So that is that. All right. Let's go ahead and jump to all your comments and see if we can answer some questions. Let's see. Steve says, it was nice meeting you at the Maine Reef Expo last weekend. Move this down a little bit. It was great to meet you too. A lot of people are saying, I'm finally here on a Saturday for the live stream. I'm here live. Scott says, ACI Chris Meckley is up and running still. Yes, he is. And he says, I've not been able to get a hold of Reef Labs. I do know that Reef Labs is okay. They weren't destroyed by the storm. But I haven't heard anything else. So I'll try to find out this week, because that's the people I use for my ICP testing. And then Northern Ohio Reef Enthusiast says, it's more important now than ever to support your local reef clubs. And I completely agree. I would really like to see the clubs come back to life. I'd like to see more of them. I know that we have kind of gotten into this mindset of self-isolating and we don't need a club or whatever, but the club meetings were really, really fun to go to. I enjoyed hanging out with like-minded people and having these different conversations, face to face. I mean, even when I talk with you guys, I'm talking to a camera lens by myself, and then I do read the chat, which is good, and I do read the comments after the video's been posted. But the one-on-one in person with people, I mean, like last weekend, I was at the, what was it called? I don't remember. It was, let's see if I can find it really fast. I can't find it fast, but I can find it maybe. Well, I was in Maine. Corals Unlimited did a frag event. Corals Unlimited is a fish store run by Jeff Hesketh, who is Mad Hatter's Reef on YouTube. And so he flew me out to be a speaker, and there was probably 6 vendors there, and people showed up all day long. It was a really neat building that we met in that was basically an office space, like a big open office space with lots of eclectic taste, and you can rent a section and do your work there and then go home. So basically you wouldn't have to have a home office. You would go to this place to do your office work, and there's all these different things. There was these little cubbies, there was small rooms, there was little booths, there was a podcast booth where you could sit by yourself and record a podcast, and it was sound isolating. There was a double podcast booth where you could sit across from someone and do a conversation, record everything, and then leave, and leave this building. Very nice little place. So we were there, and it was fun. I kind of explored a little bit. Let's see if I have anything I can show you. I would have to connect my... I never know if I can get my phone to talk to this software, because something changed a long time ago. And let's see if I can get anything here. Let's see. Camera over. And then we got that. Now let's see if we can change this into something different. They all say camera, 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 camera. Yeah, that's not a camera. That's not a camera. That's weird. Nope, can't do it. Oh well. I'll do a thing. I'll share something later. But, so it was a nice venue, and we were there all day, And then, I flew home the next day. And then coming up, I should mention this right now before we go on with any more questions. My next trip will be next weekend, and I am flying out to Long Island for the Long Island Reef Association, LIRA, and I'll be speaking Saturday night. If you want to attend, you should make plans now to be there. And I'm going to go see Joe at the Long Island Aquarium and check out, the 20,000-gallon reef. And then I fly home Sunday morning. And then the following weekend, I'm doing a double header. So I will fly to Boston to speak at the Boston Reefers Society Fragsgiving 2024. And then on Sunday, I will jump over to the NOR, which is the Northern Ohio Reef Enthusiast, and speak to them. And then I'll fly home Monday morning. So I'm actually going to be hopping across the nation over the same weekend, which is kind of wild. And kind of sort of double booked myself accidentally there. So that's a couple of weekends coming up where I'm going to be gone. And you just need to know that because there won't be a live stream those days. Kyle says, this gives me an idea, maybe like MACNA, an online-only reef conference. That's kind of the things that, is on my mind, is like, how can we do that? How can we do this conference? And really, are people even willing to pay to attend? Because everyone likes everything for free. And I do this live stream every weekend for free. But if we said, look, we're going to do this show, and it's going to be 1 or it's going to be 2 days or whatever, and then I said it's going to be, $10 to attend or $40 to attend or whatever, and then would it be just, this is the thing, how do we handle it? Because if we make it where you have to pay to attend, it's going to limit how many people attend. And then after it's over, you could then, like I was talking with someone yesterday that said, and then you charge for the videos afterwards too, for those that couldn't attend, that didn't watch live, they want to watch the playback later. So you make them pay for that. And why the money? Well, because nothing's for free and everything costs money to make something happen. And if I were to bring in a bunch of speakers, I need to pay the speakers. If I don't think I want to do the raffle part again because that was such a beating last time. I'm glad we were able to raise a bunch of money. That was cool. It worked really well. But it was so hard. And I don't know. So I would love to come up with something that I think people would like. And so that's why I need to give it a lot of thought, and I need to actually focus and put my brain on that for a while and see what we can come up with. Yep, Steve, you're right. He said, glad you got the MASNA award when you did. The last aquarist to ever be able to receive it. That is very true. Vroomy says, hello from Australia. Reefkeeper says, a buddy of mine had a dosing pump fail and dumped 1,500 milliliters of AquaPower into the tank. I've never had that happen. Was wondering if you know how an overdose of aminos can affect the tank. I told him to perform a few large water changes or anything else you would do. Yeah, it's a problem. Water changes is really it because it's amino acids. I don't even know if carbon would absorb amino acids, to be really honest. The dosing pumps always have the risk of something going wrong. There's just no way to avoid that. And there's been stories of different dosing pumps failing for a variety of reasons. Either software glitch, like there was one dosing pump that was known to do this. Crazy, right? And the fish store by my house had all his alkalinity dump into the tank in one day, and he was doing monster water changes as fast as he could to fix the problem so he wouldn't lose all the livestock. So, but no, amino acids, I don't know the answer to that. I've not encountered that or heard of that happening to people, but obviously it does. And you see, that's why it's so risky to automate certain things like vodka dosing, no-pox dosing, phosphate RX, or some kind of a lanthanum chloride dosing, because what if something goes wrong and it puts it all in at once? That's why I'm so anti-kalkwasser, because if it all goes in at once, it's risky. And so like when I was automating my vodka dosing so I could travel, because I had to fly to different places to speak, I would set up a very small vessel with it was a whole DIY rig. I used a aqua lifter and a minute timer and a oversized test tube that held 60 milliliters of vodka. because I thought if all this vodka goes in, it's 60 milliliters. That's better than a liter or whatever. 60 milliliters is very little. And, I was needing to put in something like 12 milliliters a day. So I basically had a 5-day supply set up on this automated array that I built. And that worked, and it was the way to protect. In the situation here with the AquaPower, I mean, it's more than likely he hooked up a dosing pump to the 1-gallon jug. And so a lot can go in. When you have the smaller bottles, or you refill the smaller bottles once a week, you can kind of limit what possibly could be added all at once accidentally. And it is the safer route, but it's the more hassle factor. It's way nicer to be able to set up something with multiple gallons and just trust the doser. It's just you got to be aware that sometimes something will go wrong. I'm sorry to hear that. So hopefully the livestock will be okay, and please let me know whatever happens with him, because I'm curious, because I don't know anyone that's overdosed that. And I'm not surprised. I'm just saddened that it happened. Yes, Vroomy said Australia is no different. Unfortunately, we're all strapped for cash. And that is something I've been talking about. So, let's not get political here, because I'm not going to. But I did notice someone else said, everyone needs to vote. So, yes, there's a lot going on. But what concerns me as a human being, okay, just a regular middle-of-the-line kind of guy, I'm not left or right as far as I know. I think I'm in the center. I feel like there's been a lot of... a lot of memes go around with a lot of strong opinions, and I keep trying to find the truth in the middle. I keep trying to figure it out. Like, for example, someone shared how the price of gas 4 years ago was $1.21, and now it's $6.69. Remember that when you get to the voting booth. I'm like, where is it $6.69 first of all? And you're comparing it to what the price of gas was during COVID, when no one was driving anywhere because we all hid in our homes hoping not to die. I mean, that was the reality. Gas was so cheap, I just wanted to fill up my 55-gallon barrels with gas. I just wanted to have all the gas in my backyard while I could get it for nothing. And, but you know what? My gas where I am now is not $6.69. Today, it was $2.39. Okay? So 4 years ago, yeah, it was $1.21. It was fantastic. It was unheard of. But what was it 2 years before COVID? What was that price? That's what I want to know, because that's being more accurate. If you're going to say the price under the previous president was this, let's talk about what it was in 2018, okay? And then we can say what is in 2024. We can kind of compare. And then also where it's being sold completely affects the pricing. Like, yes, it's probably crazy high in Hawaii or in San Francisco, because California loves to put tax on top of tax on top of tax on top of tax on top of the gas. And so they're paying vast amounts of gas, dollars per gallon versus what we pay here in Texas. So if we could say, well, what did it cost in Texas for gas in 2018? What does it cost today in 2024 in Texas? At least it's apples to apples. Let's just be fair. That's the best way to compare. But also, like Vroomy was just saying here, the economy is terrible there too. It's terrible everywhere. It's a global problem. And I think that a lot of people really think it's the blame of the president, that America's got all this problem. But it's global. And everyone is dealing with inflation around the planet. Everyone's dealing with not having enough money around the planet. Like he just said, Australia is no different. And Europe's no different. Let's just be fair. We're all struggling. That's the reality. And hopefully we can come out of this thing and be okay, because we need that. We need it for mental reasons. We need it just for longevity. And but we need to look at the global picture and not just think only of our own country, because there's a lot more going on than we think. And yes, there's a whole bunch of political stuff we could argue and debate, and there's nonsense, and then there's facts, and it doesn't matter. I'm not here to change anyone's opinions or anything like that. I am just saying, just try to figure out the truth and make sure that it makes sense too. I will say that, no, I'm done. I'm going to the next thing. Reef with me. Mina says, why not hold your own on educational symposium online? Do it for 24 hours, but do it over 3 days instead of one 24 marathon. Yep, I agree. Kevin says, don't you have a video tutorial on using the Inkbird heaters? No, I have never used an Inkbird. It came out, and I did get my hands on one sent to me by the company, and I didn't hook it up. There was a lot of wires, and I was just like, I don't even need this. I've never had a problem with my heaters. I've always been super safe with my setups. I never put too big of a heater in an aquarium to where it could cook the tank. And like on my main reef, the heaters are plugged into my controller. And on that tank, right there, it's got the Hydros controller. It's got the heater plugged into the controller, not into an Inkbird. Everyone thinks Inkbird is the only thing that's going to, protect your tank. But a controller, if you have no controller, an Inkbird is better than zero. But Inkbirds have been known to fail, and people have dealt with the aftermath of what goes wrong. Whether the probe suddenly thinks the tank is too cold when it's not, or the heater stayed on, or the wattage was way too big for the tank and it cooked the tank and the Inkbird didn't save. I've read the stories. It's happened. I think that initially it was probably a pretty good product. And then it got mass-produced. BRS embraced it big time and promoted the crap out of it. Everyone started getting their hands on it. And maybe the quality went down. Maybe it was just a matter of time. Now that there's more out there, we were going to see more of them fail. Maybe that was it. Maybe it was just a percentage game. But it's not a bad device. It's just not 100% bulletproof. There were things we used back in the day, like the Ranco controller. Never, ever heard someone say my Ranco controller failed me. Never heard it. Never. It was 100% reliable. It cost you $100, and it could control like one thing, like one heater, I think, or one chiller, and or maybe a heater and a chiller. I don't know. I didn't buy it, but I used the Apex controller, and it made sure my tank never got too hot or too cold. It just worked. So I don't have a tutorial. I'm sure there's got to be something on YouTube that you can find that will go into it if you're going to use that. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm just saying I've never used it. And don't 100% rely on it. And definitely don't use too big a heater on it. Like if you bought an Inkbird that came with two 800-watt heaters, return it. If your tank is 100 gallons, you need 300 watts of heat. And that means you need two 150-watt heaters. That's it. And if you have one of the heaters stay on accidentally, it doesn't have enough juice to cook your tank. And hopefully you'll notice that this heater is never turning off. You'll see that the light is always on, and you'll make a note of it, and you'll replace it with a fresh one that does turn on and off like it should. Retro Games says, I live in Roswell, New Mexico. I lost one of my tanks during the flood, but I always have a backup, or I have a lot of water as backup, and love the show. Thank you very much. John says, not all salts keep that long. I've heard that, and I don't know why that is. And I'm not going to say it's impossible, but okay. So if you mix up a batch of salt and make salt water, and then you put it into your tank, and you never do a water change, what happens to that salt? See, that salt still is good. The salt doesn't go bad. The elements get consumed by the livestock. The waste produced by the animals cause pollution, but the salt actually is okay. So why would saltwater mix go bad if it's stored properly in a sealed container or kept in a container with circulation, like an aquarium has circulation? I don't know. I just don't understand why salt water could go bad. But salt water cannot be saved indefinitely in a container forever. There are certain brands of salt water you can buy in a box. Like, it's just a box of salt water, and there's an expiration date on it for whatever reason. Maybe the plastic packaging is breaking down. Maybe the water is in the container too long, sealed, stagnant. I don't know. But there are dates, so yes, you're right about that. But I think once you've mixed salt with with water to make your own salt water, it should in theory be okay for a long time. But I wouldn't say forever. I wouldn't even say 6 months. But I have used salt water that I had mixed 3 months before, and I was still using it up, and I had no issues with any of my tanks. Michael says, what would be a good size barrel for a 250-gallon tank? If you have the space, a couple of 100 gallons or even one 100-gallon container would be good, so you have a decent-sized water change. That way you could be changing 75 gallons or so and have some left over. That might be nice. If you don't need... I saw a lot of pictures I shared today where both containers match sizes, but you saw mine. I just had the 1 of salt water and 0 for the RODI. I don't save RODI anywhere. I just fill the top off reservoirs. And this tank has a little bucket down there that holds about 2.5, 3 gallons of water. I have to refill it once a week. And then I've got the container that's under my reef that holds 40 gallons-ish that I fill once a week. And then the frag system has a small one that holds about 8 gallons. I fill that one once a week. I mean, the RODI just kind of refills everything. It's very convenient. But yeah, so if you're thinking what I can get, I would think what is the largest you're comfortable with that fits your room for salt water, because the fresh water can be smaller. You only need enough fresh water to make the salt water, and you need enough fresh water to top off your tank, as it's evaporating. Reefkeeper says, I notice my saltwater storage tends to lose alkalinity when storing for long periods. Me too. But mine also drops off a week later. So it's not even long periods of time. The alkalinity is high for a brief duration, and then it starts to drop. And I believe the reason that it's dropping is because the CO2 in the air is getting into that salt water, and it is basically taking away the buffer. And it's making the alkalinity go away, which is why I buffer up my salt water before I use it. And usually, it seems like every time I check, the water coming out is like 6.5, which is too low. I like my water to be 9 DKH, so I'm always adding soda ash, baked baking soda, to my container to bring it back up to 9.0, and then I can do my water change. Now, if your water in your container is not clear for some reason, which happens, and I've complained about this to Frank, I'd say, Frank, you're using the same salt I'm using. Sometimes it mixes up clear, sometimes it mixes up really cloudy. He goes, yeah, me too. I said, I hate that. I have a clean tank, and I do a water change to make it cleaner, and I pump in this cloudy water, and I don't like that. And it just makes me feel like I'm going the wrong direction. Admittedly, a few hours later, the water's clear again. It's okay. But I just hate that I'm pumping in this cloudier water. And he says, I feel completely the same as you do. And he said, I don't like it. So, it's that kind of mentality, that kind of thought process makes people think, I'm going to try a different salt. I want to use a different one that doesn't do this. Now, earlier this week, my friend Amy was mixing up a batch of salt water for her reef, and she mixed it up, and it got super cloudy. And the next morning, it was still super cloudy. And she ended up throwing it away. And she went and bought a new bag of salt, and she poured it in, and she mixed it up, and 10 minutes later, crystal clear. So was there something with that bag specifically? Don't know. Craig Bingham happened to see her thread and mentioned that if you're aerating it with an air stone, you can actually make the water turn cloudy. So he said, don't mix your next batch with an air stone. And she says, I actually did add an air stone that night because I was trying to move things along. And maybe that was the reason it precipitated out. So I wanted to tell you about my workaround for cloudy water. And this has worked every single time. So you mix up your big batch of salt water, and you look at it, and it's not clear. And you're like, ah. So then what you do is you turn off all the circulation, and you let it settle for a few hours. And then when you look at it, it should be clear. All that stuff that was blowing around is now sitting on the bottom of the container. And now you can pump out the clear water into your tank and have a nice water change. So that is a nice, simple solution to an annoying thing. But apparently having the water cloudy is not detrimental. I've done many water changes where I pumped in cloudy water from Aquavitro or from Fritz or from, whatever I used. Sometimes it happened, and I was just like, ugh, whatever. And I just did it because I knew it would clear up. It always does. It's just kind of, I'd much rather pump in crystal clear water. And several of those pictures I shared showed people put a sediment filter on there to catch all the particulates coming out, so that way they pump out nice clear water. And that's another workaround, having something or pumping it into a very fine micron sock, so that way it catches most of those particulates and really what's coming out of the sock is nice and clear. These are all different workarounds to fix when your water's got a little bit of cloud in it. Elaine actually is just talking about using red sea salt, and she said that sometimes she gets a precipitate after a few days and doesn't mix back in. Yeah, so really it is just a matter of letting it settle out, and then after it's settled, you can go ahead and just pump in your clear water. I've also in the past, I saw bigger stuff I didn't like in the water, I would go ahead and I would take a net and I'm scooping to get all the things out of the water that irritate me. Because I like nice, clear water. I mean, why wouldn't you? Let's see. Nice. Okay, great. So Triggerfish is Keel Brooks. He's the picture I showed earlier. This one here. And he said, I love only having to run the hose to my tank when I need salt water. My RODI and caulk lines both run from the garage under the house, through the wall, to the back of the tank. Very, very convenient. Oh, yes. Thank you for bringing that up, Bruce. I forgot about that. He says, what about citric acid? Can I use that to clean my container? You absolutely can. Citric acid works. I just wish we could buy a bigger bag of it. I'd really like to get my hands on a 50-pound bag. Like a big bag of salt, right? Those little cute pouches we get from Amazon. I go through them so rapidly, And Pump Clean is another product that you can use, which is some version of citric acid with some other ingredients that comes from Siche. And that also can be used to clean out your container to make it nice and clean. So we've got acid, vinegar, citric acid, peroxide, bleach. Those are pretty much your 5 choices when it comes to cleaning a container and then rinsing it very well. And you can rinse it with tap water. Don't be worried you got to rinse it with RODI water now. Tap water does not leave behind some horrible residue full of copper that's going to kill your tank. That's not a thing. Steve Charles says, as a 20-year veteran, reefing veteran, I realized that recently I've made a rookie mistake when mixing salt. I would not wait until the 30-gallon Brute trash can was full of water before adding the salt. I was wondering why I had so much residue in the quarter bottom of the mixing trash can. I now add salt slowly to the water when the trash can is full. No more residue and even better parameters. Yes, you're right. So here's the thing. We should always be adding the salt to the full vessel of water. If your container is only like a third full or half full and you add the full amount of salt, you actually make it hyper salty and it can cause it to precipitate out. And not only does it do that, but it's like the calcium, the magnesium, they collapse and you end up with this imbalanced, not ionically balanced salt. So instead, we want to make sure our container is completely filled before we add the salt to it. And that way, you can't make it excessively salty. Now, what's really funny is that while I'm saying that, and it's 100% true, there was a system out there called, I think it was called like dialysis, that would basically make salt water from a super salty saturation. Like, it was just like a container, a bucket filled with salt with a little moisture or a little bit of water, and somehow it pumped this ultra salty stuff into what you're going to make. And they promoted this thing. Now, it didn't latch on. I only saw it in use by one person in my history of visiting people's homes. But he swore by it. And I was like, how does that even work? Why is it not precipitating out? I have no idea. Maybe it didn't have all the ingredients in it that our salt mixes do. Like maybe it didn't have the calcium chloride. Or maybe it didn't have the potassium chloride. Or I don't know. But, because there are different brands of salt on the market. Like there's something that ACI is selling that came from, was it Reef Blueprint maybe? They had a very specific type of 3-part salt. And you had this thing of salt, that thing of salt, and that thing of salt. And you would mix the 3. Or you'd mix the 1, and then you take the other 2 and mix them with water, and then you pour them all together to make your batch. and they swore it was like the best salt on the planet. But it wasn't readily available to all of us because the shipping is too crazy expensive. So really, it only benefited people that were close enough to get it locally. So, and then, when I went to visit Polo Reef a year and a half ago, he was making his own salt using Morton salt, the stuff you buy at the supermarket, right? But mega bags. And then he had these other ingredients, and he'd be putting all these into his giant hole in the concrete floor to mix up 5,000 gallons of salt water. And that's another approach to making salt water. But yes, always add the salt to a barrel full of water is the number one rule. Elaine says if you have an industrial area in your town that processes food, you might be able to find some used barrels. You can always ask. Let's see. Aquaball says, I just got a bucket of Fritz blue salt. The salt is mixing high alkalinity. That's correct. So far, I have more problems mixing my salt water constantly. It's been a hassle. I love the salt. It's mixing clean and fast. Well, I don't understand. I don't get it. I've been using the blue box now for a year and a half, and I use a lot. I've gone through so many boxes of that salt. And yeah, it is the higher alkalinity. The red box is the lower alkalinity. The next statement, Reef Keeper says, those utility sinks are a must-have in reefing. When I built my fish room, I actually ran hot and cold water plumbing to the corner where the frag tank is, thinking I'd put a sink there. I liked the idea of the sink, but I had no drain, which meant I'd have to put a bucket under there to catch whatever was draining and then dump the bucket somewhere, and I just couldn't envision doing that on a regular basis. And the other choice was to basically rig a pipe that goes from the sink and then just goes into the garage and out the wall and down the driveway every time I'm rinsing a collection cup or something. And I was like, so I just never installed it. But the plumbing is still there to this day. Reef Keeper says there's a place near me that has filtered ocean water on tap. It's in Santa Barbara, California. Yeah, I think that's the... Is it adjacent to like a public aquarium possibly? Like, my brain is saying shed, but that's incorrect. Scripps. Is it the Scripps Institute? Is that where you're getting it? Or where you can get it? And I know there's places that can deliver massive amounts of salt water. And I knew a guy who had a big tank in his home, and he'd get... Actually, Richard Ross gets water delivered to him, too. Crazy. These guys just get their water brought to them. They don't have to go through what we go through. But... that being said, he did say, I still prefer using synthetic salt instead of dirty California ocean water. And then John Wright says, in the UK, there's a company that delivers natural seawater to your door. Desert Fish Keeper says, any advice on catching a gold spot rabbitfish? I bought him without doing homework. He's gotten a bit big for the tank, and he sees the net from across the room and dives into the rocks. You might need a fish trap. And now a fish trap is all clear. You install it in your tank. You put some food inside. You go all the way to the other side of the room with the fishing line in your hand that triggers the door. And you turn off all the lights in the room so that way you're hopefully invisible like a ninja. And then you wait for the right fish to go in the trap to eat some food, and hopefully your foxface will go in. The rabbitfish will go in there, and you can then pull the string, and the door shuts, and you can then remove the fish from the tank. Another choice would be to drain as much water from the aquarium as possible to where the fish have less swimming room. It's super shallow, and then you can go in with your net and you can scoop out pretty much any fish from the tank. Be very careful, though. Your rabbitfish does have spines that can stab you, and you don't want to get stung. Aquaball says, I wish there was a club near Los Angeles, California. I'd love to attend it, but we all have is frag swaps. They sell corals. Los Angeles had a club for a long time. I don't know that it's not there. And I feel like Jim, LA Fish Guys, I believe he was a member of that club. You could contact him and see if he knows. Yeah, he's not going to. The fish is not going to want to go into the net. Um, it's just not a thing. And leaving the net in the tank is not going to suddenly convince it. There's different things. I mean, it all comes down to what exactly your tank is like. What size is your tank? How much space do you have in the tank? Sometimes people will put up a barrier, like egg crate. They'll just insert a sheet of it in the tank, so that way the fish can only swim one side of the tank, so they can possibly catch it. A fish trap is usually the best approach. MP says, how long should bacterial blooms last when adding fish to a bare bottom in the first year? Bacterial blooms could go on for days, so you may need to run UV to make it break up and go away. I mean, that may be your need for your tank. Unfortunately, they happen. Sometimes the tank is milky white. Sometimes it's glowing green. It depends on the type of bacteria, but they can take a long time. And usually when there is a big bacterial bloom, there's a risk that your oxygen levels are plummeting. You may need to add more flow to the tank, an air stone, a venturi tube onto a power head to get some air in that tank immediately to protect the livestock. Elaine says she's going to sneak some salt into her local freshwater club next month. There's maybe a handful of salt and fresh members. Maybe we can become our own club someday. You, Elaine, can be the club with one member and then find a friend and make it two and just grow from there. That is another choice. Sometimes you've got to take things in your own hands and make it happen. I'm lucky that we still have DFW Mass. And I am the president of the club, by the way, in case you guys didn't know. We've been pretty static lately, but we'll get back into things now that we're heading into the winter. Our forums continue. We still have people buying and selling stuff every day. Okay, Michael says, I want to start a reef club. What is the best way to get started? I know nothing about getting started and keeping it going. Actually, I believe there's an article in reefkeeping.com. Let me check. Actually, how to start saltwater club. I'm wondering if I did an article on it. There might be an article on my website. Or there might be one on reefaddicts.com. I was going to say go to MASNA, but that website's gone. So basically, the first thing you want to do is find people that are interested. Back in the day, you would just kind of put the word out. We're going to have our very first meeting. We're going to meet at Starbucks. We're going to meet at the fish store. We're going to meet, wherever. And we'll just, sit down and have a few drinks and chat. It could be you invite people into your home. And you just start off with a handful of members. Then, as you want to grow it into something more, you want to become more organized, at some point you would actually form it into an actual club. You'd make a proclamation, basically. And you come up with a name, and then you can file paperwork, literally to make it an actual club, which can help, down the road with certain donations and stuff. But really, it's just you need to have a place, and you need to have a way to communicate to the members. And having MailChimp, for example, would allow you to send a newsletter to your members each month. That's a good thing to do. Having a location where you're going to meet, or if you're going from fish store to fish store to fish store, you could say this month we're going to meet at ABC Fish. And in next month we're going to meet at the fish place, and then the next place we're going to meet at PetSmart or whatever, and you just do this. And like, for example, if you're wanting to meet in a store, you can just meet. I mean, you can just do it. We're all going to be there at 2:00. Or you can contact the store in advance and say, hey, we want to be a little bit more organized. We want to put a little card table here and put some flyers on it or some business cards. And, we want to, like for example, what our club did at one point, we would set up a table inside a fish store and we would offer free water testing. And that way the store didn't have to do it. So when people came in and said, hey, could you test my water? Like, yeah, those guys from that club, they're doing it. And while you're getting your water tested, they tell you about the club. And that was another way to get into a fish store. You really want to have a good relationship with the fish store. You don't want your club to become the anti-fish store. That's really important. And unfortunately, that happens. Sometimes stores think the club is a good thing at first, and then suddenly they're like, no, I sell corals for a living. These guys are selling their frags for nothing out of their homes, and they're not buying from me anymore. I don't like the club. So you want to make sure you maintain a good relationship, a supportive relationship that works between the club and the store, so you're not alienating those stores. And our local area had more than 20 fish stores at one point. I think it's less now, but we had a lot of fish stores, and most liked the club, and some hated us. They were just like, the club and the for sale area and all this stuff. It's a real problem. So it's really hard. You're trying to herd cats, and everyone's got an opinion. And really, if you want to run this club, if you want to be the official president, basically, you need to just run it the way you want to run it, the way you think it should be run. And while other people will give you their opinions, ultimately you have to be the benevolent dictator, basically, to make sure things happen. And when you have an idea, like, we should do this, you need to commit to it, and you just need to do it. I had lots of ideas when I was club president for DFW Mass way back a long time ago, and I would just run with my idea. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't go into a big thing. If I asked for help, no one replied. And so it was never going to happen. So I just chose, I want to do this thing. Like, for example, I read that a club in California, I think it was doing tank tours. And they would go from house to house and visit people's tanks as a group. And I was like, this is brilliant. I was like, we need to do that. And, so I'd mention it and nothing happened. So I'm just going to say November 9th, we're going on a tank tour. And, whoever wants to show up, we're going to start at this house and we're going to visit these 9 tanks that day. And we would drive. And, Texas is huge. And even our small, our metroplex is really far apart. Everything's a distance. So you basically caravan and you have a bunch of vehicles all going to the first house and then the next house and the next. And you're just driving in groups and it's fun. And what I did, I just encourage each place to have some snacks, like put out a tray of cookies from the supermarket and, some drinks. And just have some stuff there, make coffee, make tea, whatever. And that way, if anyone wanted anything, they could have a little nibble. And then around lunchtime, we'd take a break and we just eat wherever we wanted. And then we'd all meet at the next tank at like 1 o'clock. And that way, we had a schedule that people could follow. But you didn't have to absolutely be in the same group all the time. And then while you're there, what you really want to do is let everyone get a chance to look at the aquarium first of all. And then you also want to allow the person that owns the aquarium to tell you about it. And a lot of times they can be pretty shy. They feel uncomfortable. It's a big crowd. They feel nervous. They're not public speakers. But if you can say, how often do you do a water change? And then they tell you their water change. How often do you test? What's your favorite coral? Why does that coral look like that? That kind of stuff. You can kind of get some back and forth and get some question and answer going. And that can kind of help ease the tension and make the conversation go. Sometimes it goes really well. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth and you're just like, wow, let's go to the next house. That's just, we all are wired a little differently. So, but that's a lot of fun. At the end of the day, you get some inspiration. And while you're there at their house, you inspire them too. You might ask them questions or point something out or notice something that they should have addressed. And you might say, hey, that power strip is in a super dangerous spot. You got to move that. And they're like, oh, I never even thought about that. And so after we leave, they kind of take care of that, hopefully. So, there's some benefits for everyone to do this. And it's an opportunity to be with other club members for a day, for a few hours. And you can do you can do a lot. You can make it as complicated or as long going as you want, or you can keep it short and simple. But having, back then, we were printing maps to figure out where we're going. And I remember we would show like all the houses that we're going to go to. and we would screenshot Maps Quest and then build a thread in the forum that would have like the first house, what size tank it was, and here's the map, and then here's the address, and then the next one, and here's the map, and it kind of showed you where it goes from this house to that. Nowadays, everything's on our phones. It's so easy. You just put in the next place, boom, just jump. It's so you can share your location with friends and know where everyone is. You don't have to I remember we'd get on the freeway as a caravan, and we're all trying to stay together, and of course other cars get in the way. And so you kind of race around the guy that's in your way that's not part of your group to get back in line so you can see the red car in front of you. You don't have to do that anymore. Now we'll get there when we get there. And if we're 10 minutes later, so be it. And if your group becomes too big, you can do it in smaller groups. You can say, Group A is going to go to these houses and Group B is going to go to these houses. And then, they'll crisscross. And so the home you're visiting gets visited twice that day, one at 9 o'clock and one at 2 o'clock or something like that. And that way you're not putting 30 people into one person's home, which we've done. We would pack the place to the gills, and every parking spot on the street was taken by cars. And then, of course, 20 minutes later, all the cars are gone. We were on our way to the next spot. So that's something you can do. Having meetings and educating is always important, but sharing stories, talking about new products. I mean, there's so much that this hobby is full of. There's so much to do. That's why, we keep having things to discuss even on this show. So that's kind of the start. If you can become a non-profit 501c3 club, that can allow you to ask for donations from companies, like Reef Nutrition or whatever, and they may be more inclined to donate. But, doing a club hoping to get things given to you should not be the reason for the club. The reason for the club is to have friends in the hobby that are in your local area that you can call upon when things go wrong. To have people you can say, hey, do you want to trade corals? Hey, do you have any salt? I'm all out and I need some and everyone's closed. Hey, my tank is leaking. Can you get over here and help me or bring your shop vac? Hey, I need to borrow your generator. I mean, yeah, it sounds like a lot of gimme, but at the same time, that's what a club is. It's supporting the members through good deeds, acts of kindness, and being able to come, to share your tanks with each other and saying, we like to feature one tank in our newsletter each month or each quarter. That's another fun thing you can do and highlight an aquarium in the club. There's a lot to do. So that's just a few thoughts, but there's got to be some articles on it. I just feel like I probably wrote one at some point, and I just don't remember where I did it. Annie's Reef says, can you please suggest a reef store in Paris that I can visit and buy from? I can't find anything online. Paris, France? Paris, Texas? I don't know that there's any fish stores in Paris, Texas. But if you're talking Paris, France, I don't know about what stores are there either. But there's got to be some way to find that on Google. Aquaball says, how often should we clean the pumps in our sumps? I would say you should clean your return pump at least once a year. And you should clean your skimmer pump once a year. If you have other pumps in there, like manifold pumps to feed GFO reactors, you probably want to clean those every 3 to 6 months. It should just be part of your routine maintenance where you go through and you clean things. If you have a circulation pump and a calcium reactor, we tend to do that about once a year as well. Can't really think of any others that you'd have in the sump. I'm seeing some pricing for gas now. Finally get into that part of what I talked about 30 minutes ago. He said, Reefkeeper says, it's $5 in Central Coast of California, but everything here is high priced. That's what we got to pay for having perfect weather. And then Desert Fish Keeper said that his gas is $5. Mitch McClintock says $3 a gallon in Virginia. And like I told you, mine was $2.39 today. That was nice. Dan says, any advice on getting 2 anemones to move? I have a 150-gallon NEM-only tank, 50 plus clowns. That's a lot. But a Nexus and a Colorado Sunburst moved to the back rockwork almost under a ledge. Okay, so sometimes you can put a power head to below in that area, and it'll encourage the anemone to move to a new spot. You could possibly look up using the anemone cannon, which is a large sponge that has a hole cut out of it that you insert a PVC pipe into it, and you take this sponge with the PVC pipe and you put it right over the anemone and you tether it down somehow so it won't move. And what happens is the creature will then climb up the PVC pipe to get to the light. And once it's in the pipe, you can take the pipe out of the sponge and you can disconnect it from the PVC pipe and you'll put it somewhere else. But ultimately, you're fighting with a brainless bag of water, as one of my friends calls it. And it could go anywhere and do whatever it wants. It's hard to control where they're going to stay. Sometimes they pick an ideal spot, sometimes they don't. Sorry about the dog. Is she going to stop barking? Let's see. Desert Fish Keeper says, I think BRS promotes putting the Inkbird into the controller so you don't wear out your controller power switch and set the power bar to a degree or two higher than the Inkbird so it's your failsafe. Okay, so I understand all that, but I've never burned out an outlet that my heater's plugged into. Ever. So let's rewind this. My heaters are plugged into an EB4, which is a very, very old energy bar from Apex, from the Apex ecosystem. And there are 3 heaters plugged into 3 outlets. They're each 300 watts. And they turn on once or twice a day, and they run for about an hour and 20 minutes to bring up my tank half a degree. That's it. And I've never had an outlet go bad. I've never had a heater burn up. It's always worked. I don't know how many times, you occasionally see something, but I don't memorize it. But it's like, oh, this outlet can turn on and off 10,000 times or something. But how many times is your heater coming on anyway, and for how long a duration is it coming on is really what it comes down to. But, I understand they're saying this will protect something from burning up. But ultimately, if I find myself in a situation where an outlet dies, I will then put a piece of tape over the outlet, and I will use the next one and until that one dies. And it almost never happens. I had one energy bar that had a dead outlet. It burned up for some reason, from something. And I just said, okay, number 6 is out. But I still have 7 other outlets on that strip of 8 that I can use. And that was the end of it. And, if I can replace something that's burned up, like if I can go in and replace a wire and make it good again, great. But if I can't, I could either ignore it or I can just get a whole new energy bar and just start all fresh again. But I haven't had heaters that cycle on and off all the time and that have caused damage. And I don't know that you would. That's the point. Look, BRS is here to sell stuff, and every video they do has a very specific reason. Educate you into buying that product. Why else would they do it? And that's not necessarily wrong, but I think the reason people come to this channel is because I'm tending to tell you as much as I can about the aquarium hobby without necessarily trying to make a sale, even though I do sell aquarium products and I do take, I do offer mentoring and all that kind of stuff. I'm here to make money as well, but I'm not as aggressive when it comes to that. But I'm also not going to try and talk you into buying 2 of everything so I can make twice as much money. I understand that you need to have backups of everything. I recommend it. And I tell you, if you're going to buy something online, like a return pump, buy a second one immediately, because that way you'll have it in the closet ready in case one burns up. But I'm not going to tell you to put both in your sump at the same time. I don't think that's necessary. John says, my saltwater comes from Waikiki Aquarium. After 6 years, my system is full and running, 1,050 gallons total. Can I cook my aquascape in the system and not start the cycle, or is that not good? What do you mean cook it? Are you meaning you want to... What are you trying to do? Get rid of the detritus that's trapped in the rockwork? I mean, I know the term cooking live rock, but I'm not sure if that's what you're asking me. Can you re-ask that question a little bit more? Dan says, are you coming to Aquashella Daytona? No, because I will not be available that weekend. I will be in Long Island. I went to the one last year. Oh yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Reef Keeper said he uses a pressure washer to clean his containers, and that definitely will help too. Matter of fact, that might work without any kind of acids whatsoever because you got all that pressure. I don't own one, and I want to buy one, and I don't know what kind to buy. If you've got a recommendation, let me know. I called a friend, and he told me about his, but his was definitely overkill. I mean, he got something where it cleans his house, it cleans his four-wheeler, it cleans his trailer, it cleans the deck, it cleans everything. And it was like $600. And I was like, I don't think I need a $600 pressure washer, but maybe one that's a couple $100. I looked at a few choices at Home Depot just for fun, but I don't really know how much PSI I need. So if there's any advice you have about pressure washers, guys, feel free to give me your insights, because I do feel like I'm going to be getting one soon. Okay, Aquaball says the Fritz salt, he's having problems with the mixing process, and sometimes it mixes high, sometimes it mixes low. Could it be the RODI system? Probably not. Your RODI system, the pH coming out of it is probably around 7. And so, let's take this off the screen. I forgot it was there all this time. If you wanted to mix up look, you could mix up a batch of Fritz salt in a 5-gallon bucket with your hand, and basically 10-15 minutes later ready to use, and it should measure high alkalinity. That's assuming you added all the salt to the water and let it mix up and then become clear. And they actually recommend using it as fast as possible. But I've been using it my own normal schedule, and like we mentioned earlier, sometimes the alkalinity drops over time, and so I will need to buffer up the alkalinity to bring it back up. And that's just like buffering up pH. You can buffer up pH or you can buffer up alkalinity. It's the same principle. It's just, what are you measuring? If you measure and it's 8.1, you want it to be 8.3, you add the stuff to bring it to 8.3. If your alkalinity is 6.5, you want it to be 9, you make it 9. You just add the buffer till it's 9, now it's ready to use. I know there's been discussion about taking salt and stirring it. Like if you have a bucket of salt, put a stick in there or a pipe and really try to churn it around in case the ingredients settled out during shipping. But like bagged salt, how much could it possibly settle? My big giant barrel, the one that was 1,000 gallons of salt water, that barrel was something like 350 pounds. And even if I were to roll the barrel across my driveway, which I could not, it was so heavy, to hopefully make it mix. It wouldn't mix, because it's not like putting clothes in a dryer that tumble. It would be like rolling a bag of flour down the hill. It would just be kunk, 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 and it'd still be exactly like it was at the top of the hill. But salt in smaller bags, hopefully the batch is good and you're good to go. You should, like if you open up a box that has several bags of salt, then what you make with the first bag the first batch of salt water, and the last bag of that same box, they should measure the exact same, because that's all the exact same salt that was packaged at the same time. But if you had a box of salt now and a box of salt from 9 months ago and a box of salt from 2 years ago, they may not be the same because they're made in different batches, and one might measure a little higher than another. But in the end, we are just putting extra elements in that are lacking. So if for some reason the alkalinity is not right, or there's not enough magnesium, or there's not enough potassium, or there's a lack of iodine, that's why we dose these extra things to fix it. But you're not changing all the water in your tank, you're changing a portion of it. And if you're changing very small portions of water, like 3 to 5% at a time, none of this matters. If you're changing 25%, then you are going to affect the water 25%. And so you would put in cleaner water than what you're taking out. So in theory, you're taking away a little phosphate, you're taking away a little nitrate, you're taking away the tinged water, you're putting in clear water. The newer water should have higher levels of manganese and molybdenum and iodine and the different things that are in there, and it should help buffer it up. Your strontium levels should be higher in your new batch than what's in your tank, just because of how salt mixes are made. But that's pretty much it. But if you find that it's going up and down, you need to find out why. Are you doing the exact same thing every single time? Like if, let's say it was high one time, and when did you measure it when it was high? And then you said it was low one time. Well, when did you measure that one? Did you measure when it was low the next day, or did you measure it 5 hours later versus the one you measured immediately? Because it definitely does change over time, just like someone else mentioned earlier in this chat. There you go. Southern California Marine Aquarium Society, SCMAS. They've been around forever. Mario says, can you tell us where you buy your fishes? I'm done with my local fish stores. I've lost all the fish I bought from them, and none have made it through quarantine. Okay, so you're opening a can of worms. First of all, there are lots of different places to buy fish, and there's lots of different fish stores to buy fish. And sometimes you will buy fish from a store that no matter what you buy, dies. And if that happens, like you buy a fish and you bring it home and it dies, and you buy another fish and you bring it home and it dies, and after 3 or 4 or 5 fish, I would stop buying from that store and I would try a different store. I have bought fish online from Live Aquaria Divers Den. I have bought fish from Biota. I tend to buy most of my fish locally, because even my Achilles, I bought it locally at a frag swap, which I still to this day can't believe happened. It makes me laugh because I was so mad at them for showing up at the frag swap with a huge aquarium and start bringing in all this water, because at frag swaps these days, everyone brings a small tank that holds 10 gallons of water. And when someone shows up with like a 75 gallon or a 90 gallon aquarium, they're going to have to haul in 90 gallons of water to fill it up. And then they're going to have to break it down and take 90 gallons of water out, which means they're going to be here forever. It's going to take forever for them to leave the building, which is really irritating to me as someone that's organizing the event. But I remember I was at the frag swap, and all the booths are set up, everything's going on, people were walking around buying things, and suddenly some lady is bringing his huge aquarium into the middle of the room. And I'm like, what? First of all, you're late. Second of all, why are you bringing a huge aquarium? Why aren't you bringing something that holds 5 or 10 gallons of water? That was all in my head. I didn't say it out loud. And then, I kind of ignored it because I was just annoyed. And I'm just like enjoying the other booths, and I'm looking at stuff. And then I finally, my eyes look back at where this aquarium is, and it's filled with fish. And I'm like, whoa, what is happening? And that's when I found out it was this store out of Dallas that sells fish. And there was a bunch of Achilles tangs in there. And so I went from annoyed and mad to, I can't wait to buy a fish. And I bought the Achilles, and I asked for the smallest one, and I brought it home, and I still have it to this day. So you just never know where things are going to work out. I have also played with, and no, I've actually bought livestock and brought it home on the plane. I came home from MACNA years ago with 2 eels in my camera bag. So, you might be at an event. You might be visiting family in another state, and you go to a fish store there, but you just need to pack them for travel. You've got to pack them in a way where they're in a double or triple bag with oxygen, if at all possible. and in a sealed cooler that you then would check as luggage. And you might have problems with the airline. Things can go wrong. It can be really difficult. But if everything goes well, you got fish you brought home. I was in a store in Arizona, and they had the Burrabonus anthias that I love. I mean, I really love them when they're little. When they're big, they're hideous. But when they're little, they're adorable. They're just so pretty, and they're crazy expensive. And this fish store had too many, and they were like $99 each, which was unheard of for that fish. I mean, it's like a deep water fish. I think it's from 500 feet down or something. And, you know, those fish, I think, retail for, these days, retail for like $300, $350 or something higher than that. And I was like, $99 is insane. I want to bring it home in my suitcase. And I just didn't. I didn't take the chance. But I could have. And I probably could have done it successfully. So that is another option. Another thing you can do, Mario, is you can drive farther. Instead of a local fish store, you go to a fish store that's farther away that you have better success with. And then find out why these fish are not making it. Is it the store? Is it how they manage their fish? Is it how you're acclimating the fish? Is it that, you know, I mean, because it could be the store is doing a terrible job and they're flipping fish as fast as they can before they die and you just keep buying them and so you're fed up. Or it could be you're doing something wrong or they're doing something wrong. I mean, that does happen. And, you know, if you can find a new place to buy fish at and it goes successfully, you just keep doing it. And then you can always go back to the first store and try again someday and see if maybe things got better. There, you know, I mean, I wouldn't write them off for the rest of my life, but I would understand saying, yeah, I'm done. I'm not giving them any more dollars. Everything I buy from them dies. I could understand that viewpoint, and I've been there. I've been through that myself. I'm like, yeah, no more. So I would then drive to Dallas, which is much farther, to buy some fish locally. HP Photography says, do you have a recommendation for getting rid of hair worm? Hair worm? Are you talking about spaghetti worms? Because those things are awesome. Or are you talking about terabellids? Or are you talking about... What's a hair worm? Come back with me with what it is, and I'll see if I can give you some advice. Spaghetti worms are good. Don't kill them. Let's see. Northern Ohio Reef Enthusiast says, we did our first tank tour via party bus in May. Nice. Yeah, the bus, the chartered bus is the best way ever. We did a chartered bus every year for the last few years, except the COVID year, to go to fish stores. So we would do an LFS tour, and by being on these big air-conditioned buses, we could all hang out and drink and eat snacks and visit and raffle and do all this fun stuff during the travel time between the stores. And didn't even have to worry about where the stores were because the driver got us there. And then 30 of us would pile out of the bus, or 40 of us go into the store. We'd be there for about an hour and 15 minutes. We'd buy all our stuff and we'd put it in coolers in the belly of the bus, and then we'd get back on the bus and we'd drink some more and eat some more and go to the next spot. It was fun. It's expensive, but it's probably the best event our club does besides frag swaps. I remember visiting, Jason saying here, he's here, hey Jason, my last clubhouse meeting had a Bloody Mary bar. Very fun and interesting night. And also, Northern Ohio Reef Enthusiasts talked about margaritas for Cinco de Mayo. See, there's nothing wrong with drinks. I remember when I went to visit, I think it was the Boston Reefers, they met in some, I think it was a veterans building possibly. And when we walked in, there was the room where the meeting was going to be, but then there was a full bar with a bartender. And as soon as you walked in, you went up and you ordered your drink. I mean, come on, that's pretty nice. Now, I know there's always someone out there who is sober and they get offended. because they say that shouldn't be present. But we're adults, and you can buy a soda. There's lots of places you go where alcohol is served and you're not offended by them. So don't be offended that the club happens to have some alcohol there. I know when I mention drinking, because people do drink in this hobby, I know it for a fact. I've seen it many, many times. We were talking about our MACNA event in 2012, and someone wrote a strongly worded letter complaining about our club promoting alcoholism and the use of air conditioning when the planet is dealing with global heating. Like they were thinking the Sheraton would turn off the AC system to save the planet. This is Texas. It's 1,000 degrees outside. Yes, they're going to cool the inside of the convention center. Of course they are. And I just couldn't believe someone actually was suggesting. Not to mention, okay, let's just pretend no air. my brain is just exploding. Imagine, okay, we're turning off the AC because we're trying to save the environment. Okay, all right. So now you've got 2,500 attendees sweating, walking through a vendor hall full of aquariums, full of water, humidity. And because the room is so warm, because we're not allowed to use AC because we're saving the planet, there's chillers plugged into every tank. And what do chillers do? They push out heat. So the room's even hotter. And everyone smells of BO. Yeah, this sounds like a great idea. No, conferences, Comic-Con has air conditioning, movie theaters have air conditioning, restaurants, shopping store, supermarkets and malls, everything has air conditioning. Your home does too. So, sometimes people rant about the craziest stuff. Reef Keeper says, wow, now I feel like I'm really getting ripped off. You are! The taxes are horrible. What you should do, next time you're at the pump, you should look for that little sticker, because there's a sticker like that on every pump as far as I know. I remember one time I was looking at the gas pump here in Texas, and I think it said, like, for every gallon, like $1.28 is tax. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you telling me the gas is like 60 cents, but we're paying almost $2 because of the tax? So, I mean, yes, our gas has been much higher in the past. There was times where it was $4 a gallon or whatever. But, Texas makes gasoline, so it's cheaper here where we are. But right now, the rates are pretty low, and they've been low. For the last month, it's been low. And I remember I posted a picture about a month and a half ago. And so, of course, I wanted to cause a little bit of controversy on my Facebook page. And I said, thank you, President Biden, for the cheap gas, because I know that riles people up. And they're like, it's not the president that dictates the price. And there's people like, absolutely, he controls the price. I'm like, no, he does not tell Texaco how much to charge. But there are things in the political system that can affect the price of fuel. I mean, it is a thing. But they're not literally saying, okay, it's election season, everyone lower the prices because if you have high prices, you make me look bad. That's not how it works. The price of fuel goes up and down. I actually watched a video, a TikTok the other day, where it talked about the price of fuel, and what the person did was they showed like the last 15 years of the fuel prices, but then they did it for like the 9 big countries. And all the countries rose and fell and rose. And I was like, wow. Because, we tend to be very insular. We think about our own neighborhood. I think about what it costs in the 2-mile radius of my house. What it costs. I look at these different stations. And then, of course, when I'm driving south, like to see my grandson, he's 2 hours away. I, of course, watch the gas stations as I'm traveling to see what the numbers are. And, it could be $2.79 here and $2.36 here and whatever. But... I always hear that California is like $4, $5, $6. And I'm just like, man, so much more. And a lot of it's tax, and tax. It's just unbelievable how much they tax you there. Reef Keeper says the EB4 and 8s were solid. Absolutely true. He said, I've had so many EB832s fail, mostly after a power outage. The new EB832 has addressed this problem. Okay, so myself, I got a brand new EB832 that had a dead outlet right out of the box. And so I put a red shirt on there from Star Trek. I printed it out, and I put tape, and I posted a picture of it in the Neptune group, and I said, he's dead, Jim. And they've said, we'll swap it out. I'm like, I kind of like it. But then eventually I did get a replacement that had all 8 working outlets. Now, I did have some of the older ones that did fail after whatever. Either they failed from the power outage, or they failed from a generator, or they just failed. But I had a buddy who's here local to me who's good at soldering, and he went and he did the thing where he takes out the bad power supply and he puts in the good, better one from Meanwell. And so right now I'm running 2 EB832s, and I had a couple of EB8s and an EB4, and I've got 2 extra repaired EB832s on backup. So if something breaks down the line, I can just swap it out. Because I'm all about the backups. As we mentioned on this show a few weeks ago, someone was talking about moving, and I said, yeah, I can't move. I have too much aquarium stuff everywhere. I'm never leaving. I can't imagine packing all this stuff up. I'll go look at Costco for a pressure washer. That's a good idea. I didn't think about that. So, what do you know what PSI yours is, Reef Keeper? Because I was looking at the different pressures. Nice. Well, Keen says he's just... This is great for my sponsor. Fritz Blue Box was the worst for me. Tropic Marin was the best, but at $120 a bucket, I switched to Accuracy, which is 2 little fishies, and man, literally 30 minutes and it's mixed and clear. Nice. Yeah, we all have different experiences with salts. Okay, so HB Photography was talking about spaghetti worms. They're taking over my substrate almost. I thought they were a pest that's getting out of hand. They really aren't. They are covering maybe 15 to 20% of my sand. They're really okay. Now, if you were to put in something that eats them, you'd have none, and that'd be kind of a bummer because they're really good detrivores. They literally are putting out those tendrils, and they're capturing detritus. They're eating it. They're consuming it. And then they're pooping a little bit into the sand bed, of course, what comes out the other end, which will be in this substrate issue, by the way, that you're about to get if you get Coral Magazine. So, but anytime I've had spaghetti worms, if I found any, I put them in my other tanks too. I think they're a great creature to have, and they belong in tanks. I think they're really a good ecosystem item. And they don't do damage. They don't kill your corals. They may even, put their tendrils out, but they don't have like stinging tentacles as far as I know. They might be sticky, maybe, because things stick to them. But, and sometimes you'll see one walking up the glass, and they're kind of cool to look at. But they're not evil, and you shouldn't have to get rid of them. He said, I saw that post. Let's see. All right. Okay, so Reef Keeper says his is around 1200 psi. I think the one I was looking at was maybe 2000 psi. Kind of thought that might be good enough. I know there's all these attachments, and you can have like this foaming thing to like wash your car. I basically want to have something that I can clean my patio out in front of the studio. I want to be able to clean the brick on my home, the driveway in front of my house, that kind of stuff. And then who knows, maybe a saltwater vat one day. That would be nice. So, all right, let's jump to this. We've been talking for, 2.5 hours. What was I thinking? Let's go here. Today is Water Test Saturday. Please do test your water parameters. We barely talked about that today. It's very important that we do this because it protects your livestock from dying. If you are aware of the different parameters of your water, you can stay ahead of them, make the corrections now before something goes wrong. And because once something does go wrong, you're going to spend a lot more time and effort and expense to correct, to course correct what's really out of whack. But if you're staying on top of this, you're making minimal little tiny changes. The livestock isn't affected. It continues to grow. Your tank gets fuller and fuller. You complain to me you have too many corals and your fish are too fat. And I love to hear those kind of stories. Guys, I will not be here next weekend because I will be in Long Island, and I will see you. And then the next weekend I'll be gone again. So I'll probably be dropping some actual videos into this channel in between the shows, so that way I'm not completely absent. And I thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Bye, guys.